In the velvet darkness of tonight, we slip beneath a Babylonian sky that glows like pressed copper, warm with oil lamps, and the whisper of a crescent moon hanging low over the Euphrates. You stand at the edge of the great river, listening to water kiss the stone steps, while the air carries scents of fresh bread, barley beer, and the eternal dust of sun-baked clay. We are about to walk beside women whose names history has mostly forgotten, yet whose footsteps still echo through the shadows of these ancient streets. Before we begin this journey together, if you find yourself drawn to these forgotten stories of the past, consider joining us for more tales that drift through time's quieter corners. Now, let the lights dim around you, perhaps turn on a gentle fan for that soft background whisper, and allow yourself to ease into tonight's exploration of lives lived in the margins of one of history's greatest cities. You move through Babylon as the heat of day relaxes into evening, the city changing its rhythm like a great drum, shifting from daylight's urgent beat to night's deeper, more measured pattern. The massive double walls loom brick upon brick, their surfaces still warm from the sun, while the famous Ishtar gate holds its glazed lions in eternal stride, their blue and gold forms seeming to breathe when torchlight wavers across their surfaces. The Euphrates divides the city like a dark silk ribbon, then joins it again through bridges and ferry crossings where the water speaks in gentle murmurs to those who know how to listen. Market stalls fold their colorful awnings as merchants secure their wares for the night. Clay cups clink together as vendors clean their stalls, and somewhere in the distance someone argues about the price of onions with the passionate intensity of a courtroom advocate defending a life. Night leans in around you, not bringing silence, but rather tuning the city to a lower, more intimate frequency, like a lute rest-rung after sunset. At the water stairs, porters finish their final loads of the day, their shoulders glistening with honest sweat as a barge pulls away with the slow, deliberate push of a pole. You catch fragments of a joke told in Akkadian that you cannot fully grasp, but the shape of laughter needs no translation. The evening air carries layers of scent that tell the story of a living city: date, syrup, sweet and thick, coriander sharp and clean, fish from the river markets, and the dry coolness of sun-baked mud walls. Across a narrow lane, a tavern keeper sweeps her threshold with practiced strokes, pausing only to swat at a persistent moth that dances too close to her oil lamp. The laws of this place once named tavern women specifically, warning of trouble if they cheated their waits or harbored criminals. These regulations were carved into clay tablets with the confidence of kings, then baked in kilns until they became as permanent as promises that would never soften. Yet tonight, as you observe the careful choreography of evening routines, you begin to understand that the reality behind these laws was far more complex than their stern pronouncements suggested. The watch moves along the wall with measured steps, their staffs tapping rhythms as they call out to each other across the darkness. Their voices weave a protective net over the sleeping city, a sound that has become as familiar to residents as their own heartbeats. Someone lifts a reed curtain and mutters at a cat, which ignores this human presumption with the divine immunity that all cats seem to possess from birth. A group of boatmen, their duties finally complete, pass by with belts loosened and sandals slapping against stone, their voices carrying the easy camaraderie of men seeking warmth, companionship, and ears willing to listen to stories of river currents and distant ports. You notice how their laughter mingles with the other sounds of evening, becoming part of the city's nightly symphony. Looking toward the narrow streets where oil lamps hang like small, steady planets, you see the women who will hold the center of our story beginning their work for the night. They share subtle signals among themselves: a small turn of the wrist, a tilt of the head, an extra note of laughter that says, "This is a space where I choose the terms." These gestures speak of networks of mutual protection and shared understanding that run deeper than any official law. You pause where the road widens near the entrance to the processional way, those magnificent bricks still holding memory of every festival procession and crisis that has passed over them. Historians continue to debate whether the sacred prostitution that later writers described ever truly included intimate rituals in the temples, or whether these accounts represent foreign misunderstanding of words and gestures whose true meanings were lost in translation across centuries. Tonight, you keep your steps modest, your eyes open, and your judgments as light as chaff scattered on a threshing floor. Above the rooftops, the great ziggurat sits with an almost smugly eternal presence. You can imagine climbing its steps in daylight, with sun striking your shoulders like a bronze smith's hammer. But at night, the ancient bricks still radiate the day's warmth, while river winds sigh over everything, with the sound of secrets being whispered. A musician somewhere in the darkness tests the notes of a reed pipe, each sound hanging in the air like a question. A dog thumps its tail rhythmically against a storage jar, providing percussion for the evening's informal concert. One star appears in the deepening sky, then 3 more join it, and this celestial appearance decides the shift change for many who work in the night. Here is something to tuck away in your memory. Some Mesopotamians marked the official start of evening, when exactly 3 stars became visible in the darkening sky. Not 2, not 5, but 3 precisely, which strikes the modern mind as wonderfully specific, and somehow deeply satisfying. 3 stars meant the world had agreed to dim its lights and let the nocturnal city emerge. The architecture of survival. You pass a perfumer's stall that never truly closes, where thick fragrances rest in small alabaster pots like concentrated memories. The vendor keeps these precious vessels near a basin of cool water, allowing the scents to rise gently in the evening air. He offers you a hint of myrrh, and you sneeze in what you hope is a respectful manner, understanding that even this small gesture is part of the evening's complex social choreography. The women nearby understand that, while they do not need to smell like gardens to draw attention, a carefully chosen bead of scent can be a tool like any other, a way to influence mood and memory. They adjust their headcloths with practiced movements, check each other's hairpins with the attention of soldiers inspecting weapons, and exchange looks that communicate volumes. Stay close, stay aware, divide the earnings fairly, and do not let one boastful sailor set the tone for the entire evening. You step into a lane where the packed earth ground remembers every sandal that has ever crossed it, where the walls press close enough that you could touch both sides by stretching your arms wide. Courtyards open suddenly with sounds of laughter bright as newly minted coins echoing from within. Here, reputations are carefully negotiated before silver ever appears, and the unspoken rules of engagement are laid down with the certainty of a surveyor's chalk line. There are house terms, guest terms, and the terms imposed by city magistrates who post public notices that almost no one reads but everyone somehow feels in their bones. You think of the clay seals that hang from cords around people's necks, those tiny carved cylinders that announce this person belongs to that household, carries that debt, has made that particular promise. The world here is written on clay tablets, waiting only for the press of a thumb to make it official. You settle onto a low bench worn smooth by countless previous occupants and watch the nightly negotiations begin. Silver coins, cut into small measured pieces, chime against each other like wind trapped in a ceramic jar. Barley serves as currency too, though its sound is softer, more like a gentle susurrus when it moves from hand to hand rather than the bright song of metal. Someone nearby makes a joke about mosquito bites being a tax, personally commissioned by jealous water gods, which strikes everyone as a very Babylonian way of coping with life's small irritations. This earns the first genuine laugh of the evening, and you nod, because everyone who lives near the river understands that it gives life generously but always presents a bill for its services later. A scribe with permanent ink stains decorating his fingers tells a second joke about his reed stylus being mightier than a spear, which sounds impressively brave until an actual soldier approaches, and the scribe becomes remarkably quiet, remarkably quickly. The contrast between literary theory and physical reality has apparently remained constant across the millennia. The economics of evening. At the corner where 2 lanes intersect, a matronly brewer taps a large storage jar with her knuckles, releasing the evening's first portion of beer. The liquid is cloudy and pleasantly sour, exactly right for the end of a day spent under the relentless Mesopotamian sun. She runs her establishment with the precision of a temple treasure, and her gaze alone can lift a troublesome customer off his stool without her hands ever touching him. She knows every regular patron by name and habit, every shortcut from harmless gossip to dangerous truth, every way that courtesy can transform into consequence when properly applied. While later dynasties will boast of glorious military conquests and name their kings after gods, cities like Babylon actually function because of people like her, the ones who understand the delicate balance between hospitality and authority. You tilt your head because something tugs at the edges of your awareness, a recognition that this city embodies both the monumental and the intimate in equal measure. The famous historical facts are indeed impressive. Nebuchadnezzar enlarged these very walls and set the Great Gate with those glazed lions whose colors still capture imagination after millennia. But the ordinary facts prove equally compelling. A woman ties her door cord twice rather than once before stepping outside. She keeps a small protective amulet tucked where only she can feel it. She knows which stairs creak and which remain silent. She has cultivated a friend who pretends to scold but is actually maintaining protective surveillance. You feel the human scale sliding into place around you like a well-fitted garment. A light rain begins to fall, barely more than a summer mist that scarcely darkens the dust, but releases the rich scent of wet clay rising like bread, baking in an oven. Two men begin arguing about omens they claim to see in the cloud formations, then quickly agree to disagree and order more beer instead, their theological debate dissolving into more practical concerns. Here is another detail worth preserving. Court scribes sometimes recorded halos around the moon as significant omens for royal decision-making, meaning that weather observations could literally transform into state policy. This represents a kind of power over events that deserves admiration, even when viewed from our supposedly more rational perspective. A third joke arrives, when a stonemason mutters that clay tablets desperately need some kind of divine correction system, then proceeds to misspell his own name while making a bet, which strikes everyone as perfectly illustrating his point. Thresholds and negotiations. You breathe with the rhythm of the city as night settles into its comfortable patterns. The oil lamps burn with steady flames now, their light neither wavering nor failing. Somewhere in the distance, a child sings meaningless syllables as a way of falling asleep, the sound drifting over rooftops like a lullaby, meant for the entire neighborhood. The watch calls the next hour in a tone that suggests the city owes them peaceful cooperation in exchange for their vigilance. You follow the dark line of the Euphrates, which knows every secret whispered along its banks, and maintains diplomatic silence about all of them. The women you will follow deeper into this story draw their reed curtains and establish their terms for the evening. They work with intention, they plan with wisdom, they laugh when laughter serves them, and they endure what must be endured. The city provides the stage, but they write the dialogue that truly matters. You linger where individual thresholds glow like small theaters, each one a private performance space framed by hanging reed mats that clatter softly when someone passes, creating a sound that simultaneously promises welcome and issues gentle warning. A bowl-shaped oil lamp burns low in a wall niche, its flame reflected in a pool of golden oil. The doorway lip rises higher than the lane level, designed to keep out floodwater and overly curious dogs, and your feet learn to step over it without conscious thought, because every regular visitor to this street knows the weight and dimensions of this particular barrier. Here the evening's real work begins, not inside the rooms but on these thresholds, where eyes meet, terms are established, and reputation stands guard, like an invisible doorkeeper. The women call this narrow strip of space the breath of the house, because everything that happens within depends on what transpires in this liminal zone. They keep it swept clean, sprinkled with water to settle dust, and touched with perfumes that speak of careful attention to detail. A broom leans where anyone can see it, because clean thresholds announce careful management within. A small shell dish collects clipped fragments of silver, tallies of barley debts, and the occasional nervous bead that has jumped its string. A neighbor to the left pretends to spin flax while her ears perform the more important work of surveillance. Another neighbor keeps a strategic stool by her doorway and maintains a memory more comprehensive than any official record. In essence, these neighbors functioned as security cameras before such technology existed, except they operated on personal loyalty rather than subscription fees. You study a clay door socket embedded in the ground, its surface polished smooth by decades of door pivots. The heavy wooden door stands open tonight, secured with a cord that displays 2 knots, never one, and you notice that the binding sits on the inside edge of the door frame rather than the outside. Even small choices speak with considerable volume in this environment. A tiny clay figurine rests beneath the threshold, placed there when the household first established this dwelling. The palm-sized guardian displays lion ears and oversized eyes that will never need to blink. Here is something worth remembering. People in this time and place treasured protective objects buried precisely where feet would cross, like practical prayers pressed into the foundation of daily life. The matron's domain. You touch the warm brick wall, and feel for the pulse of every crossing that has ever occurred in this exact spot, the accumulated weight of thousands of human interactions pressed into clay and time. A matron sits in her doorway with dignity that requires no additional ornament. Her dress follows simple lines, her hairpins are placed with geometric precision, and her gaze evaluates crowds with the same careful attention a merchant applies to measuring grain. She is not a priestess, not a nobleman's wife, and makes no pretense of being either. She is what the city's vocabulary calls a harimchu, a woman who negotiates companionship for payment and secures safety for herself through the application of practiced skill. Historians continue to debate whether the term harimchu always specifically indicated a sex worker, or sometimes simply described any unattached woman managing her own financial affairs. You choose to listen to the city itself, rather than academic arguments for the moment. The city declares that a doorway functions as a business card, that a woman who establishes terms at her own threshold deserves serious consideration. A boatman approaches, carrying the scents of river water and rope fiber, and pauses with the hesitation of someone mentally counting coins. She greets him without rising from her seat, speaking in a voice as level and steady as water in a well. He offers a small piece of silver held discreetly in his palm. She shakes her head in a manner that preserves his dignity intact. He adds a measure of barley and one additional clipped fragment of metal. Agreement begins to take shape between them. They do not yet touch. First, she nods toward the neighbor who spins thread, and that woman nods in acknowledgement. Two witnesses now stand ready, their bare feet planted firmly, and their hearing exceptionally acute. Your second joke of the evening slips in naturally. The neighbor winks with the professional authority of a guild auditor, and the boatman's shoulders perform mathematical calculations without requiring assistance from any scribe. Laws written in clay. Ancient stories walk alongside this doorway even in the darkness. You remember the clay regulations that everyone quotes in taverns when beer begins to express political opinions. One famous legal code warns tavern keepers against sheltering criminals and instructs priestesses to avoid beer houses entirely. Another section establishes penalties for merchants who use false weights. These represent mainstream historical facts, carved by royal command and fired in kilns until they achieved permanence. The women here know these regulations intimately, understand how to navigate around them, and carefully choose the spaces where they can afford to take calculated risks. A brewer 2 doorways down keeps a perfectly calibrated scale stone prominently displayed on her windowsill to demonstrate her commitment to honest measurement. A young woman here entrusts her personal cylinder seal to the matron whenever she accepts a client, treating it as collateral until payment clears completely. You notice a thin line of bitumen painted along the base of the doorframe. The matron explains through gesture that this serves dual purposes, deterring ants and discouraging entities that are decidedly not ants. She also sprinkles something crushed that releases the sharp scent of juniper berries. This single line of sticky black substance turns insects away while simultaneously providing comfort to human hearts, demonstrating how practical and magical solutions shared shopping lists in this neighborhood. She touches a pendant resting at her throat, a small bronze disc carved with the image of a goddess accompanied by a lion. The metal itself carries no great monetary value, but the gesture conveys everything. The watchman appears at the end of the lane, his staff tapping out a slow, measured rhythm as he pauses near the doorway, and lowers his voice as though the brick walls might be taking careful notes. He accepts offered water in a clay cup, and comments thoughtfully on the current state of the moon, mentioning that a pale ring around it traditionally indicates approaching trouble, then laughs at his own superstition. He also reports that a new magistrate has arrived with an unusual enthusiasm for reading written complaints. The matron thanks him with the ceremonial formality one reserves for rain during drought season. She maintains neighborhood peace through strategic offerings of water and diplomatically phrased greetings. She also keeps a mental list of names she will not accept under any circumstances: men who conveniently forget to leave silver, men who speak too loudly, men who mistake her threshold for a battlefield requiring conquest. The rituals of entry. Inside the room, the air feels cooler, but the doorway continues to hold your attention, because this is where the most important stories unfold. A girl from the Northern Territories arrives, carrying a rolled bundle of cloth and wearing a smile that works hard to project confidence. She positions herself on the threshold like a customer rather than a supplicant, which demonstrates considerable wisdom. The fundamental rule remains: never step into any room until you thoroughly understand that room's particular dynamics. The matron introduces her to the neighbor, who spins thread, and to the brewer, who maintains honest scales. She demonstrates how shadows fall across the lane at moonrise, indicates the corner where voices carry farthest, and explains the optimal volume for delicate negotiations. The recommended tone proves both low and steady, leaving clear paths for retreat if any agreement turns problematic. The third joke of the evening emerges when the matron pats the doorframe affectionately and observes that this doorframe functions as our office manager, because it already knows instinctively when to halt a conversation and when to allow it to continue naturally. Veils stir gently on foreheads as evening breezes slip down the narrow alley. Some women cover their hair, others do not, and customs here move as quickly and unpredictably as fish in shallow water. People quote regulations as though they possessed the authority of divine drums, but actual enforcement proves to be a much slower instrument, played by tired men carrying wax tablets, who often prefer pragmatic solutions to strict interpretations. You maintain carefully folded opinions, and observe what the matron actually does rather than what various authorities claim she should do. She adjusts her head covering when speaking directly to the watchman, draws it forward when a group of young men carrying new swords push through the lane with unnecessary aggression, and allows it to fall back naturally when regular customers arrive with familiar faces. Reputation functions as a living creature in this environment. It consumes caution for nourishment, and grows stronger through careful feeding. The challenge lies in understanding its dietary requirements before they become too expensive to meet. The scribe's intervention. A scribe approaches with soft hands unmarked by physical labor, and a nervous smile that suggests limited experience with evening negotiations. The last scribe we encountered told jokes about weaponry. This one carries his reed stylus tucked behind his ear like an exotic feather, and bears a small clay tablet for recording agreements. He offers to transcribe a contract for a friend too shy to negotiate directly with the matron. She listens to his proposal with careful attention, considers the implications, and agrees to provide a brief written document for a modest fee. She dictates the precise wording with clarity and completeness, ensuring that no important details remain ambiguous. The tablet will dry by morning on the rooftop, providing proof if anyone requires it later. He presses his personal seal into the damp clay surface, an image of a goat nibbling contentedly on a vine. You find yourself thinking about how many individual lives ultimately rest on such small pictures pressed into soft earth, how these tiny symbols carry the weight of identity and promise across years and distances. The city hums with life beyond this particular threshold. A donkey shakes its leather harness until small bells create conversations with night moths drawn to lamp flames. Someone sneezes emphatically and apologizes in sequence to the gods, to the neighbors, and to the donkey, demonstrating the proper hierarchy of courtesy. The matron glances upward at the sky where 3 stars have appeared, making the evening's work officially legitimate, even if the watchman forgets to announce the hour change. She touches the lion-eyed figurine in the dust with her toe, a quiet gesture requesting favorable fortune. Later, the boatman emerges with his sandals carried in his hands, attempting not to wake the entire lane with his departure. The neighbor coughs exactly once, proving that witnesses possess an excellent sense of timing. On a bench near the doorway, a small collection of tokens gradually accumulates throughout the evening. A notched shell indicates a debt to be paid tomorrow before noon. A knotted cord represents a promise to return with barley rather than silver. A carefully chosen bead from a migrant woman translates as "Please ask for my friend by name rather than by her accent." These objects function as small tools in the larger craft of maintaining safety. They keep individual faces connected to specific terms, ensuring that no one departs with a story that fails to match established facts. The evening's calculations. You watch the matron lean into her doorframe, as though it might offer conversational responses. During this single evening, she has diplomatically declined 2 men whose voices carried too much wine, encouraged one whose shyness deserved patient attention, and sent a boy home to sleep because his feet appeared too inexperienced for this particular street. She has made at least 3 decisions that will never appear on any clay tablet, yet still provide the essential scaffolding holding this night together. Out on the processional way, glazed lions continue their eternal glow, kings rest in their palaces, and grand history rehearses tomorrow's speeches. Here at the doorway, ordinary history whispers its negotiations and creates its own strategies for survival. You slip from the narrow lane into a room filled with the warm scents of toasted grain and sweetened smoke. This tavern keeps its door open to catch evening breezes from the river and to welcome news that travels on tired sandals. The brewer you encountered earlier, the woman with the calibrated scale stone, presides over her domain with the steady authority of a lighthouse keeper guiding ships through darkness. Her storage jars stand arranged in neat rows, their clay bellies rounded with promise, and their mouths stoppered with fiber bundles sealed with additional clay. A beehive-shaped oven called a tanner radiates gentle heat against the far wall, its mouth glowing soft orange. Bread rounds kiss the curved interior surface and puff with steam, then fall into hands that have performed this dance so long that wrists instinctively know perfect temperature by touch alone. The wooden countertop shows the smooth wear patterns of countless elbows and scattered silver pieces. Everything in this space announces both serious work and genuine welcome in the same breath. You notice how the floor slopes almost imperceptibly toward a small drain, because beer inevitably attempts to migrate where it should not belong. The brewer laughs when you mention this architectural detail and taps one of her jars with scarred knuckles. The resulting sound emerges low and full and confident. She skims foam with a reed ladle, pours the cloudy liquid into clay cups, and slides them across the counter with the fluid grace of a temple musician performing familiar liturgy. The taste of civilization. The beer itself proves cloudy, sour, sweet, and vibrantly alive. Here is a mainstream historical fact worth savoring. People in this time and place brewed their beer from malted barley and twice-baked bread called bapia, sometimes adding dates for additional body and complexity. The complete recipe survives in an ancient hymn to Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing, which doubles as both religious praise and practical instruction. You taste this legacy, and your mouth concludes that civilization has indeed been accomplishing something fundamentally correct for a very long time. At the communal table, a caravan guard, a weaver with lint decorating his sleeves, and a woman bearing ink stains on her fingers lean together like comrades who met 2 hours ago, yet would defend each other to the threshold by midnight. Commercial deals sprout between clay cups the way barley shoots emerge from watered trays. One debt receives smoothing through a carefully worded promise, and the brewer's assistant marks a notch on a counting stick that will transform into an official tally when tomorrow's sun returns. The back room curtain whispers softly as a familiar figure steps through the doorway, diplomat from earlier, making her evening rounds through the neighborhood. She exchanges a meaningful look with the brewer that communicates an entire paragraph of information: the watchman's current mood, the lane's general temperature, which customers require warming, which ones need cooling. You settle near the oven, where fresh bread rests in a basket, woven as tightly as an ancient riddle. The baker flicks flour playfully at a child, who has appointed himself inspector of crust quality. You feel the oven's breath rise and fall in steady rhythm. Bread and beer function as sisters in this place, one nourishing the other in continuous cycle. Scraps from mash contribute to new loaves, while stale bread returns to future mash. The technology of pleasure. Here is something particularly worth remembering. Thick beer could be consumed through long reed straws, fitted with small strainers designed to filter out grain husks and other unwanted particles. A large jar on the table demonstrates this principle, with 4 straws standing upright like reeds growing in a ceramic marsh. The first joke of this establishment lands gently when the caravan guard names his drinking straw, the river without crocodiles, prompting the weaver to raise her cup in appreciative toast. Sometimes, after all, you want flavor without unwelcome surprises lurking in the depths. A scribe unrolls a small tablet, with the careful attention of someone smoothing wrinkles from his own thoughts. He writes official-sounding language about a partnership to purchase a new brewing jar and divide future profits proportionally. The brewer's seal goes onto the clay first, a lion delicately sniffing a flower. Her partner's seal follows that same goat, nibbling its vine from earlier encounters. These images travel extensively through the neighborhood's documentation. The scribe keeps the tablet damp in a small lined basket, and by morning it will dry completely in the rooftop winds, becoming permanent record. Historians continue debating whether taverns were primarily managed by women across different historical periods, or whether the famous female sabatu represents an image sharpened by law codes that particularly enjoyed scolding tavern keepers. You allow this academic debate to hover like steam above practical reality, and watch the demonstrated competence in front of you. Settle the question for tonight at least. The architecture of hospitality. Behind the hanging curtain, the back room operates according to quiet logic and carefully planned efficiency. A partition of woven reeds creates 2 smaller, more private spaces from one larger area. A wooden shelf holds oil lamps, spare cups, a bag of charcoal, a jar of juniper for incense, and a short cord strung with knotted tokens that mean specific things only the staff can explain. A 3-legged stool sits positioned where someone can listen and let another person pour out worries without being visible from the street. The matron folds herself into this corner space sometimes, hearing individual stories until their sharp edges wear smooth. Tomorrow a magistrate might occupy this same seat to mediate complaints. Yesterday a cousin waited here while his temper remembered proper manners. Jokes accumulate in this space as well. The second joke appears as chalk marks on the reed partition that read, "If you can read this message, you owe the oven 1 fresh loaf." This inscription earns payment in laughter at minimum. A small wooden sign lists tonight's available beer varieties in scratched notations: dark, fresh, spiced with dates, and something labeled simply strong. which the brewer recommends exclusively for customers who have already completed their evening prayers. She smiles while offering this advice, but her eyes remain carefully focused on who orders what quantity. The strongest jar displays a clay seal on its stopper and maintains 2 witnesses positioned near its ladle. When someone's voice begins rising beyond acceptable volume, the back room efficiently absorbs them for water and bread until they rediscover appropriate indoor voices. House policy balances equal measures of hospitality and carefully choreographed intervention. No performer steps on another's feet when everyone maintains proper rhythm. The bonds of community. The third joke arrives perfectly timed when a donkey outside brays at precisely the wrong moment, and the entire tavern agrees that this represents their bouncer performing a wellness check on the premises. The oven keeper slides a new loaf onto the bread basket and flips his empty wooden peel with a wrist motion so elegant that you resist attempting to duplicate it. He discusses flour varieties with the expertise of a scholar: barley for beer bread, emmer wheat for softer loaves, regular wheat when caravans bring unexpected supplies. Here is another mainstream historical fact worth preservation. Workers throughout Mesopotamia frequently received portions of their wages as grain and beer rations, carefully tallied on tablets that could list an individual's daily liquid allowances as precisely as they recorded royal titles. You can easily imagine a diligent clerk writing 2 liters for the reliable porter, 0 liters for the man who loudly corrected the hymns during temple service. On a shelf sits a small clay goddess, accompanied by her lion, the same divine image you noticed on the matron's pendant earlier. Someone has tucked a sprig of tamarisk plant into the jar beside her figure. The brewer claims this goddess particularly approves of fair measurements and properly heated ovens, and no one in the room appears inclined to argue with her theological interpretation. The watchman enters briefly, lifts his cup in general greeting, and reports that the moon's ring has faded completely, suggesting calmer weather ahead. He leaves a note intended for the back room. A magistrate plans to conduct rounds tomorrow, so maintaining clean scales and swept drains would prove advisable. The brewer taps her gleaming scale stone and assures him that the drain has never been more thoroughly admired. The stories that bind. A pair of sailors enters with their distinctive sea-influenced gait, legs still negotiating the concept of motionless earth. They carry distant rain in their voices and request bread before beer, which earns them the right to tell longer stories without interruption. The matron listens carefully for names, places, and whether they maintain their sandals in orderly fashion, using these details to arrange seating so that the shy weaver need not shout over conversation, and the boastful guard sits where excessive volume dissolves naturally in rising steam. Commercial negotiations continue throughout the evening. A small wedding contract gets whispered into existence over a loaf split 3 ways, witnessed from the back room, sealed with promises of a tiny bronze pin to arrive next market day. The scribe creates another tablet smaller than an adult palm. A young woman new to the lane observes everything with careful attention. The brewer demonstrates proper foam skimming technique, explains how to hold a cup for someone who has endured a difficult day without allowing him to believe he possesses the hand that holds it, and shows how to invite a customer to the back room for cooling conversation or private discussion when circumstances require intervention. The matron demonstrates the correct method for moving through the curtain with authority rather than nervous flutter. The movement should flow like an intentional tide, not timid uncertainty. You feel these lessons settle around you like warm fabric. Outside, the Euphrates breathes its eternal rhythm. Inside, the room moves like skillfully performed music, with repetition and variation, chorus and verse, today's jest becoming tomorrow's proverb. The brewer strikes the rim of a storage jar with her knuckles, and the entire space falls silent for 1 heartbeat, while everyone listens to the note it produces. The sound emerges low, round, and absolutely certain. Tonight could develop problems in dozens of different ways, but here the rhythm holds steady. Bread, beer, and back rooms transform a potentially dangerous city into a series of spaces that know how to carry people safely from 1 hour to the next. The weight of justice. You leave the warm atmosphere of the tavern and follow the matron toward the place where spoken words crystallize into legal weights. The night has thinned to soft blue, and the watchman's staff taps like a metronome guiding sleepy feet through darkness. Near the main gate, a court space opens beneath a protective awning, benches arranged in 2 neat rows, a low table for clay tablets, and a small brazier designed to keep dampness away from official documents. You feel the particular hush that always gathers around formal rules and regulations. Even the donkeys decide to chew more quietly, which represents the highest compliment these animals can offer to jurisprudence. A scribe arrives first, yawning into his sleeve, while warming his hands over the glowing brazier. He kneads a ball of clay the way a baker handles dough, turning it until the surface becomes perfectly smooth. He shapes it into a small pillow that will hold someone's afternoon decisions permanently. A nearby basket contains reed styluses ready for use, another holds cylinder seals, and a third contains string and soft clay for creating protective envelopes around completed contracts. Here is mainstream historical fact arriving wearing sandals. Agreements in this place often received double protection, written on tablets that were then sealed inside clay jackets. When disputes arose, justice could be achieved by cracking the outer shell and reading the inner text for verification. The scribe pats one of these sleeping tablets, as though it were simultaneously chicken and egg, informing you that they produce a very satisfying sound when opened, which represents a lawyer's particular variety of entertainment. The mechanics of fairness. The matron settles into position with dignity that requires no additional cushioning. The brewer sits behind her, respectful but prepared to contribute testimony if the scales of truth begin wobbling dangerously. A young man bearing the posture of genuine regret stands to one side, clutching a token and what appears to be a carefully prepared excuse. He owes payment for a cup, a loaf, and words he attempted to retract after his second drink. The matron does not raise her voice or display theatrical anger. Instead, she places the relevant terms onto the bench like tools, one at a time, each positioned with deliberate precision. As the judges arrive, two city elders with carefully maintained beards and eyes capable of detecting mischief in the folds of any robe, the scribe begins writing preliminary notes. The first case proves straightforward. A debt gets acknowledged, a repayment schedule receives establishment. The young man kisses the ground in gratitude and promises to become a model of future restraint. Everyone pretends to believe this transformation, which represents kindness disguised as optimism. The second case captures your attention with its complexity. A woman from another lane stands before the judges with her veil pinned low across her brow. Her neighbor accuses her of wearing this covering inappropriately, using the cloth to pass as a married woman in locations where a working woman would face questioning. The room grows careful and attentive. Veils in this environment function as more than simple fabric. They represent sentences that people read before you speak a single word. The question of veils. The scribe clears his throat and unrolls a tablet containing legal precedents. He recites law that carries the sharp taste of northern winds. Ancient regulations from Assyrian administrators stating that wives and daughters should veil themselves in public streets, that certain categories of women must not adopt this practice, and that punishments for violating these boundaries prove harsh enough to tighten stomachs with anxiety. These tablets exist as mainstream historical fact, not as bedtime stories invented for entertainment. Yet the matron lifts her chin and reminds the judicial bench that this city is Babylon, that customs wear different shoes from town to town, and that local judges traditionally prefer solutions that maintain peace rather than ignite fires. Historians continue debating whether those northern veil regulations actually governed Babylonian streets in daily practice, or whether they floated through the city as stern advice carried by scribes and imperial administrators. The judges listen with the patient attention of old trees receiving wind. They understand the distinction between law that thunders dramatically and law that actually produces rain. The matron offers a small illustrative story. Last market day, rough boys jostled a girl with uncovered hair and called her degrading names until the brewer walked between them carrying a jar lid as her shield. She explains that veils in their neighborhood can provide protection, but they can also create traps if used to claim social status the wearer does not wish to borrow permanently. She touches her pendant with 2 fingers and proposes a compromise. In their lane, women who work will keep light scarves in place when crowds grow rowdy and adjust them back when speaking to officials. Cloth becomes caution rather than costume. The judges murmur consultation among themselves. One rubs the edge of a tablet like a worry bead, worn smooth by anxiety. A man from the Boatmen's Guild steps forward to provide witness testimony. He states his preference for recognizing people by their voices rather than their clothing, because river wind steals veils regularly, and he refuses to misplace his manners whenever weather changes. Everyone laughs because this observation contains obvious truth, and because the courtroom requires emotional release. Seals and settlements. The first joke lands gently when the scribe writes something that makes his stylus smile at the corner, crafting an agreement rather than a punishment. The woman keeps her scarf, but promises not to mask herself to claim privileges belonging to another household. Her neighbor agrees to stop counting pins on other people's heads with such obvious disapproval. The judges request personal seals for authentication. The goat nibbling its vine rolls first, still making social rounds like a particularly gregarious pet. The lion sniffing its flower follows, firm and absolutely certain. The woman's personal seal displays a six-pointed star with long arms, elegant and slightly dizzying to contemplate. The scribe moistens the clay surface and rolls each design with practiced pressure. The tablet receives their pictures the way a calm pond receives landing geese. Here is something especially worth remembering. Some contracts included fingernail marks pressed along the edges, small half-moon shapes created by witnesses who possessed no personal seals but carried thumbs and maintained neighborhood standing. The matron invites the brewer's apprentice to press one neat nail into the clay surface. The girl grins like someone whose name has just learned to write itself in permanent form. A thin man with worried eyes steps forward next, accusing a sailor of stealing a silver clip and swearing an oath to Shamash, while touching a broken cup. The sailor swears he purchased the clip fairly and offers his own oath on the king's name. The judges exchange glances with the weariness of men who have heard oaths thick as barley porridge many times before. One raises an eyebrow toward the river. The word ordeal moves through the air like smoke. Here is another mainstream historical fact, gliding in like shadow on water. This city believes firmly in trial by river. When truth refuses to remain stationary, the accused can leap into the Euphrates. If he sinks and the river claims him, guilt proves heavy. If he swims free and returns to shore, truth floats alongside him. The river's judgment. The sailor's complexion shifts to pale around the gills, and he suddenly discovers that he remembers the legitimate buyer's name after all. The judges nod approvingly. The river keeps its coolness for another case entirely. While witnesses shuffle positions, the scribe wraps a completed tablet in damp cloth and secures it with string. He slips the package into a clay envelope, writes the case summary on the shell's surface, and seals the scene once again with that well-traveled goat. The second joke emerges when he mutters that this goat now works on retainer and should begin paying guild dues. The judicial bench pretends not to find this amusing, because dignity represents a garment that wrinkles easily. You walk a small circuit around the brazier, feeling heat warm your palms. The matron stands with posture you wish to borrow for difficult days ahead. She has argued successfully for safety without inviting trouble, for cloth that functions as tool rather than title, for seals to speak clearly when voices might be misheard. The judges thank her without using the specific word thanks. They instruct the watch to escort the neighborhood boys down the quieter lane tonight. They remind the tavern keeper to maintain her scale stone in bright condition. The brewer bows slightly and promises to polish the stone until it reflects questionable mustaches with uncomfortable honesty. Before departing, a final petition asks whether a temple singer may drink in a beer house, if her relatives stand as witnesses. The room grows careful once again. Ancient law states that women dedicated to gods must not enter taverns under any circumstances. Yet life writes in pencil while law carves in stone. Festivals blur established lines, mourning blurs them further. The judges craft an exception as thin as a reed. Tonight, with two elder women present and the singer properly covered, she may toast her cousin's safe return from dangerous travel. Whether such recorded exceptions represented common practice or rare kindnesses that scribes preserved because they tasted delicious remains a matter of historical debate. The memory of stone. The third joke brushes the rim of possibility when the watchman volunteers to keep personal watch over the singer's cup, to ensure it does not violate law by refilling itself without proper supervision. When the bench dismisses the evening's crowd, the matron thanks the scribe with a cup of cool water and a promise to send bread from tomorrow morning's first baking. The goat and lion rest peacefully on drying clay. The veil debate leaves behind a gentle breath of truce. You step back into the lane where the city exhales its accumulated tensions. Law has not become gentle through these proceedings, but it has learned how to fit inside a night like this one without breaking essential structures. You feel the weight of tablets settling in your mind, and the lightness that comes when neighbors choose practical sense over dramatic spectacle. You carry the echo of judicial voices down the lane, as the matron lifts her reed curtain and reaches for a cedar box tucked behind a storage jar of lentils. Inside, wrapped in a scrap of soft cloth, lies the object that speaks truth when mouths might lie. It represents a cylinder seal, cool even in this warm room, drilled through so a cord can carry it against skin. She places it in your palm, and the carved stone feels heavier than its size suggests. Gravity concentrated into signature. The engraving displays a parade of tiny truths. A lion sniffs a flower while a star floats above a seated goddess. Between these figures flows a stream of wedges that name the owner and bless any agreement. Names pressed into wet clay travel farther than feet can carry them. She demonstrates the proper technique for pressing it into damp clay. First, roll from left to right with steady pressure, avoiding any wobble, then examine what the stone has printed. Tiny wedges raised like reeds after spring rain. The brewer watches with amused attention and retrieves a tablet waiting on a shelf, half-written and still glistening with moisture. The scribe arrives at his own unhurried pace and touches the surface with the back of his finger to assess readiness. He breathes a low sound that means the clay has achieved perfect consistency, neither too thirsty nor too sleepy. The language of signatures. Here stands mainstream historical fact with calm confidence in this city. People sign agreements with cylinder seals rather than written signatures. They roll their personal stories over clay envelopes that hide contracts inside, and squeeze seals over strings that secure doors, baskets, and storage jars. A broken seal means someone has walked where they should not have ventured, which initiates a conversation everyone understands immediately. The scribe writes the matron's name in neat, slanted wedges. He does not ask her to repeat it twice. He already knows the proper order of components. First comes the given name, then daughter of, followed by her father's name, and sometimes of the house of when neighborhood location matters for identification. He adds the year designation that provides dating, not with numbers but with a significant event that crowns the calendar. He murmurs as he inscribes, "Year the king raised the wall beside the river." He writes this phrase like a lullaby, each word settling into clay with musical rhythm. You watch wedges appear across the surface, each one pressed at an angle that makes the tablet resemble a small field after beneficial rain. She leans closer and reads along with him, her finger hovering above the signs without touching, because clay remembers fingers as clearly as it preserves words. She corrects a city name that the scribe nearly abbreviated to save space. He smiles and expands the line so the syllable sits cleanly in its proper position. He allows you to press one divider mark, a tiny wedge that means, and then, like a blink inside the sentence structure. He rolls the lion and flower design in the margin space. At the bottom, he invites additional witnesses. The brewer lends her lion again for official use, the goat nibbling its vine ambles across the clay, as though searching for edible portions. A younger woman presses her thumbnail carefully along the edge, and the tablet receives all these signatures like names spoken where gods can hear blessings. The weight of names. The matron reads aloud, Amet Ishtar, servant of Ishtar, which creates a mouthful that tastes like concentrated courage. The scribe mentions encountering a customer named Nidinti Marduk, given by Marduk, whose personal seal shows a small priest with elaborately braided hair. You meet a girl called Balani, Lady of Me, which sounds like simultaneous declaration and poetry. These names carry directions embedded within them, indicating where individual loyalties begin and how they connect to larger divine networks. Historians continue debating whether women across every quarter of Babylon held personal seals in their own right, or whether this privilege concentrated within certain families, temples, and professions. Your eyes trust what you observe tonight. The matron keeps her stone positioned against her heartbeat, and she decides independently when it touches clay. The scribe points toward the inner tablet sleeping within its clay jacket. He taps it with knuckles so gentle, you barely hear the resulting note. That inner text holds exact terms and conditions. The outer shell carries summary information, seals, year identification, and witness marks. If someone calls foul play, judges can crack the shell like a walnut and compare texts for verification. He grins and describes this moment as when the courtroom goes quiet because clay never forgets anything and rarely forgives deliberate deception. The first joke rises and floats when he calls the outer shell polite conversation and the inner tablet, the voice you use when you know you are absolutely correct. Archives of the heart. You step back as the matron opens another bundle from her cedar box. A clay ball bears a hole where cord once passed through. The cord has vanished, but the seal still wraps the surface in a dancing scene of figures and symbols. This represents a bulla, she explains with obvious pride, which once secured a jar of date syrup destined for a relative living upriver. If someone had cut the cord improperly, the rolled picture would not align when examined again. This system provided practical magic, hospitality and trap, combined in one elegant gesture. She preserves the empty bulla because it contains memory, still carrying the faint scent of sweetness even now. Here is something worth tucking away. Clay holds more than deliberate writing. Archaeologists particularly treasure the paw prints that cross ancient bricks and tablets, tiny cats that walked through drying stories without reading the room first. The scribe mentions that a tablet from this very lane, created long ago, bears a kitten's autograph near a witness mark, and everyone decided the kitten qualified as a minor deity of mischief for the remainder of that week. The brewer adds that a goose once stepped on a receipt and made the numerical figures look like they were wearing shoes. You can imagine a temple accountant staring at evidence of webbed feet and composing urgent prayers for patience with divine humor. The scribe sharpens his stylus with a quick pass over a smooth stone and writes a colophon at the document's end. Written by Enlil Naya, son of Idin Sin, in the year of the wall, in the lane of the brewer whose scales shine. He winks because compliments embedded in colophons represent sound business practice. The matron pays with clipped silver and a measure of barley that will become breakfast porridge tomorrow. She adds a small bead so green it makes the scribe's eyebrows rise appreciatively. Payment lands like properly fitted cord, stone for stone, grain for grain, name for name. The architecture of trust? You ask what happens when someone loses their personal seal. The matron does not hesitate in her response. You visit the lapidary and commission your picture to be changed. You send word to scribes you trust, asking them to note the modification on future tablets. You inform your neighbors and the watch about the alteration. Then she smiles. You also stop borrowing outfits from friends for a while because fraud appreciates costume opportunities. The second joke slides in like a quiet wink. Lose your seal here, and you essentially freeze your credit with every scribe in town until you resolve the situation properly. A messenger arrives carrying a basket of tablet fragments from a house sale 2 streets away. The scribe reads broken pieces. The way a skilled baker interprets crumbs. He finds half a name, a father's lineage, the corner of a year designation. He moistens the edges, presses them together temporarily, memorizes the joints, then allows them to separate again so they can dry without forcing. He explains, sometimes you can rebuild entire commercial agreements from a handful of corners. Sometimes you discover 2 tablets that contradict each other completely, and you must fetch neighbors and collective memory to help choose the accurate version. Historians continue debating whether seal pictures represented primarily personal piety, pure fashion, or signals of professional role. The scribe pours you water and observes that fashion wins more arguments than people typically admit. On nearby shelves sit school tablets shaped like fat lentils. An apprentice uses these for practicing signs. She wriggles with pleasure when the scribe praises her straight diagonal marks. You look over her shoulder and read symbols for barley, silver, house, woman, witness, debt, and joy. She scratches a small smile at the end, then hides it quickly when the matron walks past. The third joke rustles softly when the scribe whispers that the sign for joy lacks official recognition, but sometimes tablets need cheerful expressions to dry properly. The persistence of memory. You conclude where you began, with the seal resting in your palm. The matron reclaims it, and threads the cord through the center hole, knotting it twice, never once. Like the doorway cord from earlier, she tucks the stone under her collarbone until it matches her body temperature. Names and marks flow out into the night around you. A boy runs past shouting for a friend, repeating a nickname until it becomes rhythmic percussion. The watchman calls the advancing hour. The river tugs at its banks like a large animal testing the strength of its restraints. On rooftops throughout the neighborhood, tablets harden into permanence. You can almost hear them setting with the soft sound of lids seating properly on containers. Agreements have been made, stories have been captured before they could wander into uncertainty. The goat has completed another diplomatic circuit, the lion has sniffed another flower, and the star has observed everything with patient celestial light. You walk back into the lane carrying the sleepy pride of someone who has learned the passwords of an older world. These access codes do not change easily, and they arrive with multi-step verification, a neighbor's nod, a witness's pressed nail, a picture rolled across clay that will remember you longer than you remember yourself. You climb uneven stairs that feel like the city's pulse pressed into brick, following the matron into a courtyard that carries the sense of bread crusts cooling, lamp smoke, and wet earth from watered plants in ceramic containers. Walls rise close around you like clay cliffs softened by accumulated soot and human laughter. Rooms lean inward on every side, each doorway covered with reed curtains that flutter like captured breath. This represents the space where women work and rest, where nights stretch and fold around human needs, where courtyards function as communal living rooms and rooftops serve double duty as escape routes for fresh air and private thought. The city's grandeur expresses itself elsewhere, in massive walls and impressive gates. Here the scale remains human, measured in footsteps, whispers, and the space a clay bench requires beneath supporting bodies. The shared spaces. This courtyard belongs to many residents rather than one household. You hear a pot scraping against stone as a neighbor stirs lentils for evening meal. A boy draws lines in dust with a broken stylus, creating his own cuneiform system that probably means cat or monster, depending on who interprets the marks. The matron gestures toward a corner where a rope pulley lowers buckets into a cistern, cool and shadowed. Each household guards its water allocation like precious treasure, but every child knows which bucket to borrow when thirst outweighs strict rules. Here is mainstream historical fact, slipping in quietly. Archaeologists have uncovered entire neighborhoods organized around courtyards exactly like this one, with communal ovens, shared wells, and staircases leading to rooftops where summer nights provided the only relief from heat trapped within walls. You lean against a low parapet and peer into one of the rooms. Date palm beams support the ceiling. Plaster walls still radiate warmth absorbed during the day. A woven reed mat covers the floor completely. A woman unrolls bedding from a wall niche, shaking it once, twice, then smoothing it flat while humming a tune that represents notes strung like beads rather than formal song. Something worth preserving. Reed mats served both as flooring and sleeping rolls, and sometimes receipts record them as part of wage payments, the way modern contracts might specify pillows or blankets. A quality reed mat could outlast many careless friendships. A view from above. From overhead comes the surprise of river air reaching this enclosed space. Rooftops make this circulation possible. You follow the matron up a ladder worn smooth by countless hands. Night opens around you like an unrolled map. 100 rooftops connect like steps on a giant staircase. You observe women moving across them, carrying jars, gossip, laughter, slices of melon for friends. A soldier might patrol the street below, but rooftops belong to neighbors and evening wind. The city hums with the sound of 1,000 small fires contained in clay. A dog howls somewhere in the distance. A baby hiccups, and the river sighs like someone attempting to tell secrets too long held. The matron pulls a clay lamp from her robe and sets it on the parapet edge. The flame flickers, sending shadows upward to join the stars in their ancient dance. She points toward the west, where the processional way maintains its faint glow even now, torches marking the path of lions cast in glazed brick. She shrugs with philosophical acceptance. Grandeur has its designated place, but survival maintains its own perspective and draws its own maps. She waves to a brewer 3 rooftops away, and the brewer lifts a cup in acknowledgement. The rooftops function as telephone systems without wires, carrying messages through gesture and timing rather than voice. Historians continue debating whether women truly owned these elevated spaces or merely borrowed them in the absence of male authority, but the evidence tonight speaks clearly. Rooftops ring with women's voices, claimed rather than borrowed. Below in the courtyard, a boy calls to a girl across the open space. His voice cracks and echoes embarrassingly. She throws a date pit in mock disdain, and it strikes the parapet near your hand. The matron chuckles, observing that the pit serves as both insult and invitation. The first joke of the night launches here. If he collects the pit tomorrow and shows it to her, it demonstrates persistence. If he steps on it instead, it proves he can recognize a hint. Love has always functioned as a fruit-based game. Stories in the darkness. In another room, an elderly woman tells a story with the rhythm of someone who has performed it hundreds of times. She speaks of a king who built walls so strong he believed time itself would pay rent for the privilege of touching them. Then she laughs and adds that the river maintained different plans entirely. Her listeners laugh as well, not because they consider kings small, but because they understand that walls are large while water proves larger. You catch a glance from a girl who rolls her eyes as if to communicate. Yes, grandmother, we have heard this story, but please do not stop telling it. That particular expression has lasted 3,000 years completely unchanged. The rooftop air cools your skin gradually. A scribe leans against a chimney, sketching symbols in accumulated dust. He claims to be practicing for a tablet he will copy tomorrow, but you notice his strokes appear looser, more playful than official writing. They resemble birds rather than administrative signs. He grins and admits, this represents what happens when scribes pretend to compose poetry but fear witnesses. The second joke slides naturally into place when the matron observes, clay tablets prove too heavy for love notes anyway, unless you need an excuse to develop arm muscles. Nearby, the brewer recounts a story of neighbors using rooftops to escape floodwaters, moving from roof to roof like cats until the river receded to normal levels. She mentions that someone attempted to roast fish on a roof that night, and the smoke made the gods hungry enough to demand their own dinner. Everyone laughs, but silence follows, because flood represents not just memory but continuing possibility. The weight of water. Here is mainstream historical fact, securing the silence. Babylon faced floods and droughts that shaped survival itself, recorded in royal chronicles and omen texts alike. Rooftops served as both sanctuary and observation post, lifeboats constructed from baked mud and human ingenuity. The matron demonstrates the technique of rooftop whispers. Stand near the edge, cup your hands, and allow your voice to roll like water into the courtyard below. Secrets can travel downward as easily as across horizontal distances. Tonight she whispers the name of a new girl in the lane, passing it into the ears of allies before gossips can sharpen it into weapon. This represents protection transformed into action. Historians continue debating how much genuine solidarity existed among these women, whether competition outweighed care, but here you hear alliances stitched into night air, voices choosing each other over isolation. Downstairs, a cat leaps onto a mat and sends a clay cup rolling. The vessel clinks, wobbles, and miraculously avoids breaking. The household bursts into relieved laughter. The third joke gets claimed immediately when someone shouts that the cat must carry a seal of immunity stamped on its paw. You recall the kitten autograph from an earlier tablet, and suspect this is not the first time cats have received divine paperwork. The fabric of night. Night folds deeper around the rooftops. Evening breeze carries scents of sesame, fish, and lamp oil through the air. The matron pulls her cloak tighter and points toward the stars, counting 3, then 5, then 7. Not simply numbers, but signs embedded in patterns. Omens live in celestial arrangements, and tonight they appear kind. You settle on the roof edge, and feel how the city exhales around you, how rooms, courtyards, and rooftops weave together into single fabric rather than separate spaces. A woman hums in one corner, a boy mutters in his sleep, the brewer laughs, the scribe sighs contentedly. The night does not bring silence, but it offers peace. You rest against warm brick, using the rooftop as pillow, and the city as lullaby with rough but comforting edges. Rooms keep secrets carefully, courtyards share them judiciously, rooftops send them flying into river breeze with generous abandon. You close your eyes briefly, and Babylon feels simultaneously small enough to hold in cupped palms, and large enough to carry you safely through darkness. The rooftop air continues to linger on your skin as you descend once more, this time into a room that glows with smaller, steadier light. The matron kneels before a low brick shelf where a clay lamp flickers beside a dish of oil, and she gestures for you to sit as though you too have business with the goddess whose presence fills this intimate space. This is not temple ceremony with grand processions and formal choirs, but private devotion tucked inside plaster walls. A string of beads dangles from a nail above the lamp, casting shadows like patient birds waiting for dawn. The goddess who listens. The name you hear most frequently here is Ishtar, the bright, the terrible, the sweet, the powerful goddess who rules both love and war within the same divine breath. The matron sprinkles flour into the flame, which sputters briefly then straightens as though the goddess has accepted this modest offering. She whispers something not intended for your ears, not meant for anyone except the fire itself. Here is mainstream historical fact, gliding across the quiet. Ishtar's worship spread throughout Mesopotamia, her temples ranking among the most lavish, her hymns filled with promises and warnings in equal measure. Kings called her the Lady of Battle, but women like these address her more intimately, as the lady who listens when walls feel too constraining. Beside the lamp rests a basket of protective charms, knots tied in red thread, tiny clay plaques, beads worn smooth by years of nervous touching. One amulet displays a lion standing upright, its expression more mischievous than fierce. Another bears the impression of a star pressed into wet clay with a stylus and fired until it cracked along the edges. The matron selects a small figurine made of baked clay, hands raised, hair coiled, and positions it near the lamp. She smiles as though introducing an old friend. This guardian protects sleep, she explains, and knows the techniques for keeping nightmares outside where they belong. Worth remembering, small clay figurines like this have been discovered, tucked under thresholds, hidden within walls, or placed in room corners, guardians stationed like miniature sentries throughout domestic spaces. The practical sacred. The brewer enters quietly, carrying a pinch of date syrup in a small dish. She dribbles the sweetness onto the threshold, then wipes her hands on her robe. The matron hums approval. Syrup proves both sweet and sticky, impossible for wandering spirits to ignore, representing hospitality and trap combined in one gesture. You watch as she ties a red cord around the curtain post, knotting it twice with quick, practical movements. The knot serves multiple purposes: protective ritual and functional necessity. You have begun noticing how every cord in this quarter prefers 2 knots rather than 1, and you suspect the gods have strong opinions about proper counting. A girl leans against the wall and recites a hymn in sing-song voice, stumbling on certain words but maintaining steady rhythm. The hymn praises Ishtar's bright eyes and storming heart, declaring that she makes lovers strong and warriors weak. The room chuckles softly because here both outcomes feel potentially useful. The girl blushes, then repeats the problematic line correctly. The first joke lands when the brewer mutters that if the goddess makes warriors weak, perhaps she should be hired to negotiate tavern disputes. Everyone laughs, but not too loudly. Humor in front of a lamp requires careful volume control. The matron brings out a tiny clay tablet covered in cramped wedges. A scribe wrote it for her several seasons ago, a collection of protective phrases and divine names. She places it near the lamp when business feels particularly sharp, as though written words themselves were soldiers standing guard. You tilt your head attempting to read the inscription, but the wedges prove too fine for easy interpretation. She laughs softly and observes that half the power lies in not understanding every sign, allowing mystery to perform the actual work. The rhythm of protection. Historians continue debating whether such tablets represented personal spells, generic amulets sold at markets, or temple leftovers brought home for private use. The academic discussion wanders in scholarly circles, but here the answer presents itself simply: the tablet calms hearts, therefore it stays. From outside drifts the faint percussion of drums. You imagine a procession at the main temple, but the matron shakes her head. Not tonight. Tonight the drumbeat belongs to young men showing off in the street, pretending to be priests of Nabu when they are really just bored. The brewer rolls her eyes and declares, "The gods can distinguish between authentic and counterfeit, even when the boys cannot." The second joke slips in naturally when she adds that Ishtar has probably already assessed fines, and payment will arrive in the form of sudden rashes. The matron dips her fingers in oil and touches the flame quickly, precisely. She then touches her forehead and heart, pressing a smear of oil onto the clay figurine's chest while whispering again. The room fills with the gentle scent of sesame, and a breeze sneaks through the reed curtain, making the flame bow without extinguishing it. Everyone sighs slightly, relief disguised as ritual. Fire staying lit always provides comfort, even in a world that documents its history on clay tablets. You lean back, noticing how the space feels simultaneously heavier and lighter, heavy with intention, lighter with release. A woman enters with tired shoulders and settles on the mat without speaking. The matron touches her wrist gently, then gestures toward the lamp. The woman breathes deeply, eyes closing. No words prove necessary. The gesture of presence provides sufficient communication. Divine domesticity. The third joke appears when a child outside calls "Cat, get down," followed by a crash and a colorful oath. The room smiles because cats have always chosen dramatic timing, as though they too crave divine acknowledgement. The lamp burns lower gradually. The matron folds the beads back into their niche, returns the figurine to its basket, and allows the cords to hang still. The oil dish receives its cap. She exhales as though completing a conversation with a friend who listens carefully but does not overstay her welcome. You sense this represents nightly work rather than grand miracles, not wild visions but steady rhythm, tending flame, knotting cord, feeding a goddess crumbs and whispers. The city outside may roar tomorrow with war, silver, or flood, but tonight within these walls, Ishtar's heart glows steadily. You step back into the lane where night has grown softer, stars climbing higher, voices quieter, lamps flickering like patient eyes throughout the neighborhood. Somewhere a hymn continues, half prayer and half lullaby, the goddess's name stretched into notes that soothe the air itself. The matron smiles at you as if to say, Survival here involves more than contracts and silver. It also includes this one flame against darkness, one prayer folded into breath, one goddess leaned upon like a sister who cannot refuse help. The hour of negotiation. The flame of Ishtar's lamp still warms your vision as you step back outside, but the lane has transformed again, busier now, as the hour leans into its deepest belly. This marks the time when the city's men arrive. Some bold, some weary, some carrying trouble like a scent they cannot wash away. Soldiers bearing bronze at their belts. Sailors whose hair still tastes of salt. Scribes who smell faintly of ink and clay dust appear in small waves, each group carrying its own rhythm and risk. They do not arrive as a single crowd but as individual tides, each following its particular pattern of need and opportunity. The matron waits by her doorway, practiced eyes reading them like lines inscribed on tablets. You lean close enough to hear the quick judgments slip through her silence, the rapid assessments that mean survival in a world where choosing wrong can cost more than silver. The soldiers swagger first, boots scuffing stone, talking louder than the street requires. They carry desert dust in their throats and barracks discipline in their laughter. They want noise, drink, and proof they remain alive, after campaigns that press them against steel and fear. Here is mainstream historical fact strolling in with them. Babylon's armies were not endless, but they were well supplied, drawing men from villages, captives from wars, and even foreign mercenaries into the same ranks. When they returned from service, the city bore the weight of their hunger for food, companionship, and release from memories that followed them home. The matron allows them entry only if they leave their swords at the doorway, a clever psychological trick. Permit a man to feel taller by unbuckling his weapon, then remind him the blade rests safely beyond his reach if anger rises too quickly. The choreography of safety. Next come the sailors, leaning as though their legs have not yet agreed to trust solid earth. They bring news before they bring silver, and their voices carry reports of storms that spun ships near the mouth of the Gulf, ports where dates grow sweeter than women's smiles, and waters that tested both courage and seamanship. They smell of fish, tar, and stubbornness that comes from arguing with weather. Their gifts tend towards small shells, unusual stones, and occasional foreign words traded like coins from distant markets. Worth tucking away. Sailors sometimes scratched graffiti into tavern walls, using partially foreign languages, part prayer and part boast, leaving riddles for archaeologists centuries later to puzzle over, while wondering what exactly they were trying to prove or preserve. One sailor tonight carves a tiny fish into a clay bench with his knife, earning a sharp swat from the brewer before he can finish. He grins, but she does not grin back, and he understands that some boundaries hold firm regardless of his charm. The scribes arrive last, quieter and more cautious with their silver. They carry the day's dust on their fingers and ink stains beneath their nails. Their shoulders stoop from long hours bent over clay, and they lack the boldness of soldiers or the swagger of sailors, but they wield their own particular risks. A scribe can write down promises or erase them, can craft complaints that walk directly into judges' ears tomorrow morning. Whether scribes who entered houses like this did so openly, or with careful attention to hiding their names, remains a matter of historical debate. But tonight this one removes his stylus and sets it on the mat, as though laying down a weapon. He orders beer, then asks softly for a song, and his voice carries the exhaustion of someone who has spent the day making other people's words permanent. The art of balance. The matron orchestrates them with the skill of a conductor directing musicians. She guides the soldier to a corner where his booming laugh cannot topple others. She positions the sailor where evening breeze can carry his salt smell outward rather than inward. She places the scribe where his voice will not vanish entirely but will be heard when he finally lifts it. You realize her work involves as much musical timing as hospitality. The brewer plays her part as well, pouring beer like she pours careful timing into the night. One soldier tells a boast that sounds suspiciously like mythology, claiming he fought alongside Marduk himself, though the god apparently smelled of onions. The room groans, then laughs despite itself. The first joke of the evening gets paid here. The sailor counters with his own claim that a fish leaped onto his deck already roasted. A miracle personally arranged by Shamash, the sun god. The scribe, half drunk on beer and exhaustion, mutters that Shamash stays too busy keeping legal proceedings straight to roast fish for anyone. The second joke lands sly and small, earning chuckles from everyone who has dealt with courts. The matron hushes them before their voices swell beyond the boundaries of conversation, into the territory of quarrel. Music begins then, not from harp or drum, but from humming. A girl sings a lullaby from her home village, and the soldiers grow still, remembering their mothers or their children, or simply the quiet of nights without spears. One sailor closes his eyes and sways like a mast responding to wind. The scribe scribbles the rhythm into the margin of a tablet, pretending it represents a legal form, while actually just catching a tune that moved him. The matron does not stop the song. Songs here purchase more peace than silver ever could. The categories that matter. She leans toward you and says quietly, names matter less than behavior. Soldier, sailor, scribe represent categories that don't guarantee safety. What matters is the one who listens when you say no, the one who pays before he drinks too deeply, the one who does not linger where he lacks welcome. That represents the real division that counts. She indicates with her chin, a soldier already snoring softly, harmless as a child now. The sailor carving his fish has been diplomatically escorted outside to cool off. The scribe writing songs in margins has been offered bread, because the brewer knows ink-stained men forget to eat. Historians continue debating the relationship between working women and the city's men of rank, whether systematic exploitation, tolerance or collaboration wove through law and custom. In this room, the answer proves less abstract. It lives in the matron's raised eyebrow, in the brewer's firm hand, in the girl's song carrying over sweat and beer. Power shifts with each heartbeat, and tonight it tilts just enough toward safety to let laughter bloom. The third joke sneaks in when the brewer mutters that the gods themselves would pay silver for the quiet that falls when soldiers stop boasting. A scribe adds that someone should inscribe that observation on a tablet and issue it as official law. Everyone chuckles, even the soldier who pretends to sleep. The reckoning hour. Night stretches toward its deeper hours. Silver changes hands with soft chiming sounds. Barley tallies accumulate notches. Seals roll across damp clay, pressing stories into permanence. Soldiers dream of campaigns, sailors of tides, scribes of stories they dare not sign their names to. The women move through them all, weaving careful patterns of presence and distance, generosity and caution. You sit in your corner observation post and feel how delicate this balance remains, how one laugh too sharp could tilt everything dangerously, but also how skilled these women are at keeping equilibrium upright. When the crowd thins naturally, the matron pours a little water on the floor, washing away drops of beer and sweat. She hums the last notes of the lullaby. Outside, the watchman taps his staff twice, signaling the advance toward deeper hours. The men depart, but their voices linger like smoke. The women remain, shoulders perhaps a little heavier, purses certainly a little fuller, and lamps still burning steady. The courtyard cools, lamps burn lower, and silver emerges for counting, chipped, clipped, heavy, light. You sit beside the matron as she tips a small leather pouch onto the reed mat, releasing coins, or at least their ancient cousins, that spill like dull stars across the woven surface. These represent lumps of silver cut to weight, rather than minted to uniform standard. A few bent rings, small pieces tested with teeth for purity. No neat round coins exist yet in this Babylon. Money here gets measured rather than simply accepted by count. She lifts one clipped fragment to her lips, tastes the metal the way a brewer tests mash, and nods approvingly. The night's work requires translation into weight, grain, and promises that will stretch into tomorrow's obligations. The arithmetic of survival. The brewer joins her, carrying a tally stick notched like a wooden ladder. She sets it down carefully, its grooves catching lamplight and shadow. This stick remembers who owes what, functioning like a patient accountant who never talks back. They match silver fragments to tallies, barley measures to storage jars, debts to faces that carry them. Here is mainstream historical fact walking into the room, alongside them. Throughout Mesopotamia, barley served as everyday wage currency, while silver provided the flexible tool for long-distance transactions. Temple records preserve both, with scribes writing columns of grain rations beside careful inventories of clipped silver weights. Your ears adjust to the rhythm of their counting. 1 notch for barley, 2 for silver, 1 for repayment, due tomorrow after the festival concludes. The matron pulls out a small clay tablet, soft as well-worked leather, bearing the record of a debt 3 measures of barley owed by a specific person to be paid after religious celebrations end. She traces the cuneiform signs with her thumb, then sets the tablet aside with the silver clips. She smiles and observes, paperwork existed before kings learned to write their names. She tells you that a scribe once wrote a receipt for half a fish, just to prove the principle that everything can be documented. This actually happened, according to archaeological evidence, tiny receipts for absurdly small amounts, half measures of oil, scraps of cloth, debts so petty they feel like inside jokes preserved across centuries. The tools of commerce. A girl works with tallies using a string of beads, sliding one for every measure of grain calculated. She hums to maintain rhythm, the way some people count sheep for sleep. You catch her grin when she sneaks an extra bead onto a string, only to have the brewer flick her ear in correction. The first joke falls there when the brewer declares, "If you cheat your own tally, you are just stealing from tomorrow's breakfast." The girl laughs and replaces the bead with theatrical sighing. Across the mat, the sailor's tokens reappear from earlier negotiations. One shows a fish scratched into clay, representing a pledge that a basket of catch will arrive when his boat unloads cargo. The matron rolls it thoughtfully in her palm before setting it on a pile marked maybe. She trusts silver more than promises of fish. The brewer points to a token knotted with string, a promise of payment in dates. Dates remain tempting currency, but only if the caravan survives its journey. The matron mutters that silver does not rot in desert sun, but she leaves the string token on the yes pile anyway. Risk keeps life appropriately sharp. Historians continue debating whether women in these trades managed their own financial accounts or depended on male relatives and scribes for mathematical assistance. The evidence shifts depending on which neighborhood provides testimony, but tonight the proof sits directly on the mat. The matron counts with calm authority. The brewer tallies with firm precision. The girl practices without male interruption. The scribe may carve final words when agreements require permanence, but the numbers already belong entirely to these women. The system revealed. The matron explains her organizational system with pride. Silver clips get wrapped in cloth and buried in a ceramic jar positioned against the back wall. Barley receives storage in sealed sacks marked with her lion and flour cylinder seal rolled into the clay caps. Debts exist as written tablets, dried in sunlight, then stacked like small bricks in a corner basket. The basket grows heavy with other people's promises, and she taps it with her toe while smirking. That represents tomorrow's problems. Tonight, only silver that chimes and grain that smells fresh will matter. She sets aside careful portions for offerings. Flour for the lamp, oil for Ishtar's niche, sweet date syrup to pour on the threshold. She reserves another portion for neighbors, a loaf for the spinner who watches the lane, a measure of barley for the watchman who drinks water at her door, a small silver clip for the brewer's apprentice who carried jars without complaint. Community functions as its own form of currency, requiring investment for future returns. The second joke arrives when the brewer sighs and observes silver proves heavy to carry but light to lose, while barley stays light to carry but heavy to store. The matron shakes her head and replies, "That explains why we trade in both forms. We prefer to suffer equally." They laugh with the kind of humor that has learned to keep bitterness small enough to fold into wit. The girl draws a small doodle in accumulated dust, a fish, a jar, a loaf, a coin arranged in sequence, then erases them quickly as though embarrassed. The matron pats her shoulder and says encouragingly, "Even doodles can become contracts if you believe hard enough." The weight of promises. That earns the third joke when she claims a chicken once signed a debt by leaving tracks across wet clay, and the obligation still got enforced. Everyone laughs, and the brewer adds that the chicken probably negotiated better terms than most sailors manage. When counting concludes, the matron smooths the reed mat with her hand as though sealing an agreement with the floor itself. Silver disappears into its cloth wrapping, barley into storage jars, tablets stacked in neat order. A faint breeze slips through the reed curtain, carrying river-cooled air into the warm room. Night has shifted from chaos to ledger, from laughter to tallies, from negotiation to permanent record. You realize this represents the true heartbeat of the house, not soldier swagger, not sailor boasts, not scribe sighs, but this careful weighing of silver, sealing of barley, recording of debts, stacking of promises like bricks in a foundation. Outside, the watchman taps his staff again, as another hour changes hands. Inside, the matron closes her cedar box, ties the cord twice rather than once, and exhales with satisfaction. Tomorrow will bring new debts, new fish tokens, new promises requiring evaluation. But tonight the accounts balance sufficiently for sleep. The ledger closes, but unease continues circulating in the air like smoke that refuses to dissipate. Silver can be counted and barley sealed, but safety cannot be weighed on any tally stick. The matron leans against the wall, rubbing her temples with tired fingers. You sense the strain that never fully departs, the risks that follow every choice, every client, every night. Behind the reed curtain, you hear coughing. A woman doubles over, shoulders shaking with each spasm. The brewer slips inside with a jar of water, her face creased with concern. Illness walks through these neighborhoods as freely as soldiers, and unlike soldiers, it never leaves coins on the counting mat. The fragility of bodies. The coughing eases after water, but the matron frowns with worry. She mutters about heat, dust, and the gods' sense of humor when it comes to timing. Here is mainstream historical fact settling heavily into the room. Ancient Babylon fought illness with combinations of medicine, incantation, and educated guesswork. Texts survive listing remedies for coughs, fevers, stomach pains, powders made from plants, fragments of minerals, whispered charms written alongside them, because medicine and magic were never considered separate disciplines. You think of cuneiform tablets where recipes and spells sit side by side, as though healing without words remained fundamentally incomplete. A midwife arrives, summoned quietly by neighborhood signals you did not notice. She carries a basket of tools, reed knives, swaddling cloths, pouches filled with herbs that release sharp green scents when opened. She greets the room with the calm authority of someone who has witnessed more beginnings and endings than most priests. She feels the woman's forehead with expert fingers, listens to her chest with practiced attention, then opens a leather pouch. Out comes a root that smells bitter and medicinal. She grinds it with a smooth stone, mixes the powder with water, and offers a careful sip. Worth preserving licorice root served as one such remedy for throat and chest problems in Babylon, used long before modern cough syrup bottled the same plant's healing properties. The matron thanks her with payment in barley rather than silver. For those who heal, food proves as valuable as precious metal. The midwife also checks another woman's wrist, feeling for pulse patterns, nodding with satisfaction. She asks in low voice about monthly cycles, about bleeding schedules, about which women carry worries they dare not name aloud. She functions as part healer, part confidant, part guardian against dangerous silence. The network of care. Historians continue debating whether midwives in Mesopotamia were primarily temple-trained professionals or neighborhood-wise women who learned through experience. Either way, their names rarely appear on official tablets, though their hands shaped futures in ways kings could never manage. From outside comes the sound of laughter, but it jars against the hush inside this room. A sailor's voice rises, then cuts off abruptly with a thud. The watchman must have provided correction. The brewer adjusts the curtain tighter, creating more privacy for healing. The matron sits with the coughing woman, murmuring comfort while rubbing her back with gentle circular motions. The first joke arrives when she observes the gods must have hired mosquitoes to keep humans humble. The woman wheezes out laughter between coughs, and the room softens with shared human frailty. Later, the midwife prepares a small protective charm, a clay disc pressed with wedges spelling out a god's name. She ties it to the woman's wrist with cord, knotting it twice rather than once. She mutters an incantation under her breath, words like stepping stones across a stream. You cannot catch them all, but you feel the rhythm meant to coax sickness toward the door. The matron watches carefully, neither mocking nor questioning. In this city, laughter may greet legend, but no one laughs at healing charms when bodies remind everyone of their fragility. She lights a piece of juniper, allowing smoke to curl into corners while waving it toward the doorway with deliberate motions, murmuring that it clears out more than insects. The brewer snorts softly and claims the only thing it clears is her patience, but she does not argue when smoke drifts protectively through the space. The bitter medicine. The second joke slips in when she declares that if smoke could cure stupidity, half the city's men would be healed by now. Even the coughing woman manages weak chuckles. The midwife leaves behind careful instructions: more root tea, a poultice on the chest, water kept cool but not too cold. She pats the matron's shoulder, promises to return tomorrow, and disappears into the lane with her basket of mysteries. The matron lingers by the lamp, eyes focused on distances you cannot see. You realize she is counting risks beyond illness, risks of clients who drink too much, men who mistake kindness for surrender, judges who interpret law too strictly. These dangers also require remedies. Some can be handled with laughter, others with firm refusals, still others with a watchman's timely intervention. She pulls out a pouch of powdered substances, showing you one bright as saffron. She explains that it soothes pain or makes someone sleep if slipped into beer, but warns that a little represents medicine, while a lot becomes danger. She adds that sometimes danger is what keeps danger at bay. You understand, without needing the complete sentence. Survival is a dose measured very carefully. The girl from earlier, the bead counter, tally checker, sits nearby with wide eyes. The matron allows her to hold the pouch briefly, then reclaims it, tying the cord twice. She tells her that knowledge also functions as a kind of herb, healing in small doses, poison if misused. The girl nods solemnly, absorbing the lesson. The third joke sneaks in, when the brewer mutters that knowledge never spoils, but it does ferment strangely in some people's heads, creating unpredictable results. The vigil continues. The coughing woman drifts into sleep, her breathing still rattled but easier. The matron smooths her hair gently, then steps back as her shoulders lower slightly with relief. Outside, the lane has quieted, as the last drunk finds his way home or receives escort there. The watchman hums tunelessly while stamping his staff in rhythm. Inside, risks have been named, measured, and soothed as much as possible. You sit with them, feeling the fragility of human bodies in this place, how thin the line between laughter and fever, between work and collapse. Remedies here include roots and charms, careful surveillance, and circles of women who will not let one of their own face sickness alone. Babylon writes its grand history in bricks and kings, but survival writes itself in these whispers, these coughs, these roots crushed on stones, and lamp flames that keep darkness from claiming too much territory. The lamp smolders lower, coughing quiets into steadier breathing, and the matron nudges the reed curtain open to admit fresher air. Out in the lane, the night's soundscape has shifted again, no longer featuring soldiers boasting or scribes humming, but rather a chorus of voices strung loosely together, the city's gossip network at full operation. You lean against the doorpost and allow the sound to wash over you. Alleyway songs, jokes tossed like pebbles, nicknames shouted across rooftops. This represents how reputation lives and breathes in this place, not in law courts or clay seals, but in mouths that refuse to stay diplomatically shut. The songs of the street. At the corner, two women spin flax and trade verses of a street song. One sings, "The brewer's jar is never full." The other responds, "Because the brewer drinks before us all." They laugh, then pass the song to a child who adds, "And the brewer's donkey sings louder than she does." The first joke of the night lands with a chorus of giggles. The brewer herself leans from her doorway pretending outrage while her smile betrays pride at being immortalized in verse. Here is mainstream historical fact settling into the rhythm around you. Music and poetry in Mesopotamia were not exclusively for temples and royal courts. Lullabies, work songs and satirical verses got sung in streets and recorded on clay tablets, just enough to let us glimpse how ordinary people teased and remembered one another. One preserved text even scolds a lazy beer seller, a voice from 4,000 years ago that could have been written yesterday. The matron shakes her head knowingly, as though laziness in taverns represents an eternal human constant, requiring no historical documentation. A group of boys runs past shouting nicknames with the enthusiasm of town criers. They call one Two Left Sandals because he once appeared wearing mismatched footwear. Another earns Donkey Breath, for reasons you would rather not investigate too closely. Something worth tucking away. Ancient Babylonian school texts sometimes preserved insults as writing exercises, describing people as "your mother is a brick carrier" or "you don't know your own name." These were training exercises, but they also demonstrate how embedded humor and mockery were in education itself. Imagine being forced to memorize insults as homework assignment. The currency of reputation. The matron listens with careful attention, filtering laughter for warning signs. Gossip functions as both safety net and sword. If a woman gets praised as fair dealing, clients arrive steadily. If whispers paint her as cheating or cruel, doors close throughout the neighborhood. Historians continue debating whether reputation proved more powerful than formal law in these communities. But tonight you observe the answer swaying before you. The brewer's scale stone may keep her legally compliant, but the children's songs keep her beloved. A peddler enters the lane, juggling small talk with his basket of trinkets. He sells beads, pins, and rumors about the king's latest banquet. He swears the king demanded 3 roasted ostriches, though no one can confirm that ostriches even live anywhere nearby. The matron raises an eyebrow with amusement. The second joke rolls in when the peddler insists the birds flew in specifically to volunteer for the feast. Children squeal with delight at this image, and the story mutates instantly into a song about King Ostrich. By dawn it will become proverbial wisdom, and by next week no one will remember where it originated. From a window above, a young woman sings a sharper verse, her voice edged with pointed mockery. The soldier pays with silver, the sailor pays with shells, the scribe pays with promises, and the gods pay with rain. The crowd roars approval, even the watchman chuckling as he stamps his staff approvingly. The power of satire. The matron smiles because satire represents survival strategy here. It allows frustration to escape safely, disguised as performance. Better to laugh than to riot, and humor provides steam release for pressures that might otherwise explode. She turns to you and murmurs that every lane has its bards. Some carry lutes, others just quick tongues, but their words travel faster than scribes' tablets and last longer than kings' decrees. A song once sung will stick to you like clay to sandals. The women understand this power, so they feed beneficial songs when they help their reputation, and drown harmful ones in deliberate silence when they hurt. The brewer laughs loudly at her donkey rhyme, transforming it into personal shield. A rival attempts to spark a harsher rumor, but without laughter to carry it, the malicious words die in dust. The watchman joins briefly, telling a story about a magistrate who fell asleep during court proceedings. He claims the man's snoring echoed so loudly, it cracked the tablet he was supposed to be reading. The third joke bursts out, exaggerated but irresistible, and the crowd repeats it while reshaping details. Soon the magistrate is not just sleeping but dreaming. He was a goose, then flying off the bench entirely. The matron shakes her head, but allows the story to spread, understanding that mocking officials remains safe enough as long as it stays funny, rather than threatening. The living archive. Here is mainstream historical fact weaving back into the tapestry. Babylonian omen texts sometimes interpreted odd events like animals behaving strangely, or officials stumbling in public as signs from gods. To people here, a snoring judge could mean more than simple embarrassment. It might indicate that Shamash himself grew bored with justice that particular day. The matron mutters that the gods probably laugh at these songs too, and maybe that is why the city has not burned down yet. As night deepens, songs turn softer, mothers sing children to sleep, neighbors hum while grinding flour for tomorrow's bread. Even gossip quiets, replaced by steady rhythms of pestle against mortar, the eternal percussion of domestic life. The matron settles back with satisfaction. A city that gossips loudly is a city at ease. A city too quiet is one waiting for trouble to announce itself. You drift with the rhythm as laughter fades. Songs dissolve, nicknames soften into snores. The lamp in the doorway flickers. The reed curtain sways gently. Reputation has been fed for another night. Sometimes with mockery, sometimes with kindness, always with words that refuse to stay still. You realize that Babylon's memory is not stored only in clay tablets. It lives equally in songs tossed into evening air, jokes etched into alley walls, and laughter that outlives the moments that sparked it. The festival's call. The laughter of the lane fades, replaced by new rhythm, drums echoing faint but insistent, like pulse from the city's heart. The matron straightens, and the brewer wipes her hands on her robe with purposeful movements. Festival night has arrived, and with it rules loosen, silver flows faster, and the street wears crowns it does not usually deserve. You follow them toward the processional way, where torches flare brighter than stars, and incense drifts heavy as honey through the air. Every breath becomes a banquet of scents, perfume and roasted meat, smoke and celebration. Crowds surge shoulder to shoulder, each person functioning as both participant and spectator in the night's grand theater. The gods ride above them, carried on gilded carts, statues swaying as priests chant and wave cedar branches in blessing. Here is mainstream historical fact, stepping proudly into the torchlight. The Babylonian New Year festival, the Akitu, ranked among the city's grandest rituals, celebrating Marduk's triumph over primordial chaos. Priests carried his image from the temple to a special house outside the city, reenacting cosmic myths to reset the universe for another year. Whether tonight represents Akitu or a smaller feast, the energy feels identical. Order suspended, joy demanded, the world tilted just enough to let different possibilities emerge. The matron pulls her scarf low across her brow, not from shame but from clever calculation. Festival nights attract watchful eyes as well as drunken ones, and in the jostling crowd she can move with more freedom than usual. Anonymity provides its own protection. The economics of celebration. The brewer strides ahead confidently, calling greetings and exchanging gossip faster than she normally sells beer. Already her customers have doubled in number, and some arrive with purses looser than usual. Some women grow bold enough to step into taverns without fearing wagging tongues. Worth preserving on festival days. laws often bent like reeds in wind. Even priestesses, normally barred from beer houses, were sometimes permitted to drink in celebration, their laughter mixing freely with crowd noise. Children chase the processional carts, shouting praises and teasing each other with festival boldness. Musicians play pipes and drums while dancers in bright cloths spin until torches blur into streaks of light. A juggler tosses clay cups painted with lions, catching them to appreciative cheers. A soldier spends his barley rations too quickly, buying sweets wrapped in leaves and spilling crumbs across his sandals. The matron shakes her head and observes the gods themselves must do cleaning duty after festivals. The first joke arrives when the brewer mutters that even she cannot see the street beneath all the spilled beer. The procession halts as priests raise their hands, chanting verses older than recorded memory. The crowd hushes, swaying like one enormous body connected by shared breath and anticipation. Historians continue debating whether such processions included sacred unions, rituals between priestesses and kings, meant to embody divine marriages. Some claim these were purely symbolic, others insist they were enacted literally. Tonight the debate lives in whispers. A neighbor nudges the matron, hinting at rumors that a priestess has chosen a partner from outside the temple for tonight's rite. The matron shrugs diplomatically. Festival nights thrive on rumor, and she knows better than to weave her life around temple secrets. The liberation of night. When drums resume, rules dissolve further. Couples slip away into alleys, coins jingle into waiting hands, and songs shift from hymns to earthier verses. The matron guides her younger companions with careful attention, understanding that business proves brisk but danger doubles alongside opportunity. She stations one woman near the doorway, another by the back room, forming a human net designed to catch trouble before it spreads through the house. She herself moves through the crowd, reading eyes and intentions, deciding which men promise joy and which threaten risk. At the tavern, beer jars empty faster than they can be refilled. The brewer's apprentice carries foaming cups with both hands, barely keeping pace with demand. A group of sailors attempts to organize a drinking contest, lining up reed straws around a single enormous jar. This is no exaggeration. Archaeologists have discovered great jars with multiple straws, exactly the type that transformed drinking into shared spectacle. The sailors slurp loudly, the crowd cheers enthusiastically, and one man falls backward laughing before he even finishes his portion. The second joke blooms when the matron mutters that sailors must believe gods grant extra blessings through longer straws. Silver flows like water, barley tallies accumulate notches, even shells and beads change hands tonight. Festival generosity creates its own currency. A scribe scribbles IOUs on scrap tablets, promising payment after hangovers clear. The matron collects them carefully, tucking each promise into her pouch with a knowing smile. Tomorrow's debts become tonight's songs. The temporary freedom. You watch women step more boldly tonight than usual. Some laugh openly in public spaces. Some sit on tavern benches without lowering their voices. Some walk arm in arm with clients past the processional way, as though daring neighbors to express disapproval. Historians continue debating how much genuine freedom women claimed during festivals, whether it represented fleeting theater or authentic loosening of social boundaries. From your observation point, it appears to be both simultaneously. For a few hours, the world tilts deliberately, and the tilt favors those clever enough to seize opportunity. Fireworks of a primitive kind, torches hurled high and caught again, draw crowd attention upward. The watchman rolls his eyes, muttering that every year someone burns their sleeve. The third joke strikes when the brewer shouts that gods must enjoy slapstick comedy if they keep sparing these performers from serious injury. The crowd laughs, jugglers bow theatrically, and another torch nearly singes a donkey's tail. As night deepens, exhaustion seeps in gradually. Priests carry statues back to their temples, chants softening, incense waning. The crowd scatters like sparks from a dying fire, some toward homes, some toward doorways, some toward sleep in the street itself. The matron returns to her lane with cloak heavy from accumulated smoke and perfume. She counts silver quietly, satisfied but cautious. Festivals fill purses reliably, but they also sharpen gossip and stir jealousies that can prove expensive later. Tomorrow she will sweep her doorway twice, wash her scales until they gleam, and whisper thanks to Ishtar for allowing the night to pass without disaster. The return to earth. You follow her back, feeling the weight of the city's heartbeat still pounding in your bones. Babylon can roar like a god when it chooses to celebrate, but as torches dim and streets return to darkness, You understand that real survival is not found in the feast itself, but in the careful walk home afterward. The day after festival feels like a city-wide hangover, even for Babylon itself. The processional way lies littered with reed cups, broken sandals, and one thoroughly confused goat that no one admits to owning. You trail the matron as she heads toward the northern gate, where caravans from steppe and desert arrive coated in dust and patience. Here taverns cluster like shells on the city's edge, positioned to catch whatever caravans drop: silver, gossip, exhaustion, and stories of distant roads. The gate towers above you, glazed bricks glinting faintly even in morning haze. Guards lean on spears, watching for smuggled goods and smuggled lies with equal attention. Here is mainstream historical fact, greeting you calmly. Babylon's gates were not simply doors but stages where caravans declared their cargo, paid taxes, and allowed officials to record tallies on clay tablets. Every sack, every jar, every donkey's load became a line in the city's endless accounts. The taverns nearby serve as unofficial waiting rooms for this bureaucracy, providing equal measures of refreshment and intelligence gathering. The caravan's gifts. Inside one tavern, air grows thick with smoke and the weariness of long travel. A merchant drops onto a bench with audible relief. His robe stiffens with accumulated dust, his purse heavy with silver earned on distant roads. He slaps a token onto the wooden table, a small clay bulla impressed with a seal showing a scorpion. The brewer behind the counter nods knowingly, setting aside measured portions of beer and bread in exchange. Worth remembering, some merchants carried sealed tokens ahead of their caravans, vouchers of sorts, allowing them to eat before goods were even unpacked. The scorpion token translates as, "I owe you barley, trust me until tomorrow." A group of guards from the gate, drinks from long straws inserted into a shared jar. They tease each other about bribes, then quickly hush when the tavern audience chuckles too loudly. The matron watches with careful amusement, understanding that drunk guards mean loose tongues and loose tongues mean valuable news. One whispers of a raid beyond the steppe, another mentions a shortage of tin that will make bronze more expensive. The brewer listens intently, storing each word for later trade in the marketplace of information. The first joke of the day arrives when a merchant sighs that his donkeys display more intelligence than his apprentices. The brewer replies that donkeys at least know how to find their way home. The apprentices, sulking nearby, mutter about unfair comparisons while the matron hides her grin. At a far table sits a foreign woman, her accent rough, her hair braided in unfamiliar patterns. She trades a string of beads for bread, then attempts to explain in broken Akkadian that her caravan carries wool rather than grain, so no one should expect barley deliveries yet. The commerce of information. The tavern crowd leans in attentively, because news travels faster than carts in places like this. A single misphrased sentence can ripple into rumor, then transform tomorrow's market prices. Historians continue debating whether taverns functioned as informal exchanges for trade information, or whether we project too much modern economic logic onto ancient social spaces. Tonight, watching men scribble notes on scrap tablets while a woman gulps beer between explanatory sentences, you suspect both interpretations carry truth. The matron gestures toward the gate itself, where you observe guards weighing sacks of grain with scale stones, scribes recording figures with practiced efficiency, merchants haggling over taxes like gamblers arguing dice odds. Silver chimes into collection jars before vanishing into the city treasury. Some merchants curse under their breath, others laugh, knowing they have already hidden half their actual load. A donkey brays so loudly it interrupts a magistrate's lecture. The second joke lands when the magistrate glares at the animal, as though considering issuing a fine. The crowd cheers the donkey as champion of resistance to authority. Back in the tavern, the matron notices two men arguing over a map, scratched onto a clay shard. One insists the river route proves safer. The other swears the desert path runs shorter. A scribe gets called to arbitrate, but charges 2 cups of beer for his wisdom. He points out that both are wrong, because the real danger comes from tax collectors rather than roads. Laughter erupts, coins clink, and the argument softens into friendly disagreement. The third joke gets earned through truth disguised as wit. The rhythms of trade. The brewer's apprentice sets down a fresh jar and grumbles that caravan men drink like camels, but pay like sparrows. The matron chuckles, advising her to remember that every sparrow carries feathers, and feathers can stuff pillows if you collect enough of them. Wisdom packaged as humor. Humor serving survival. Here is mainstream historical fact, threading through the noise. These taverns at city gates were so thoroughly linked to caravan trade that kings sometimes issued warnings against fraud. Here, fearing too much cheating would drive traders to other cities. Yet the warnings themselves prove that traffic never stopped flowing. Merchants still came, dust still coated their robes, silver still spilled across counting mats. City gates opened predictably, and taverns filled as reliably as sunrise. As dusk falls, torches at the gate flare to life. Merchants pack away their tokens, guards stagger off duty with beer-stained lips, and donkeys finally receive their own rations of barley. The matron gathers her pouch of silver and shells, satisfied that she has earned more than coin tonight. She has earned whispers, prices, omens. Tomorrow, when the lane wakes, she will know which goods are arriving, which shortages to prepare for, which names to speak kindly to, and which to avoid entirely. The gate taverns empty slowly, but their echoes carry forward. Deals, rumors, and laughter represent caravans that never stop moving. You follow the matron home as night cools around you, city walls towering above like protective arms. Behind those walls lie palaces and temples, but here at the threshold of the gate, the pulse of trade and conversation keeps the city alive, one jar of beer at a time. The foreign quarter. The next evening, the matron leads you to a quieter corner of the city, away from the roar of gates and soldiers' boots. Here lanes twist tighter, houses lean closer together, and voices carry accents not born on Babylonian soil. The air holds scents of unfamiliar spices, sharper, smokier than the sesame and cumin you have grown accustomed to. A woman sits on a low stool outside her doorway, hair braided in patterns you have not seen before, singing softly in a language that flows like water over smooth stones. When she notices your approach, she smiles, gestures welcomingly, and presses a piece of flatbread into your hand. Hospitality requires no translation between any languages. The matron nods respectfully. This woman represents one of many foreign women who have woven themselves into the city's fabric. Captives, migrants, traders' daughters, refugees who followed caravans and chose never to leave. Here is mainstream historical fact. Babylon was never purely Babylonian. Akkadian, Aramaic, Elamite, and countless other tongues drifted through its streets like currents in a river. Cuneiform tablets sometimes preserve letters written in 2 or 3 languages simultaneously, testament to how much translation shaped daily life. In neighborhoods like this lane, language functioned not only as survival tool, but as currency itself. The hospitality of strangers. Inside the woman's house, scents of cumin and garlic prove sharper than the sesame and onion combinations you have grown to expect. She pours beer into cups and tells a story in broken Akkadian, filling gaps with expressive gestures. She points to her chest, then upward, murmuring the name of her goddess, one you do not recognize. She points toward the ziggurat visible in the distance, then shrugs as if to say, the Babylonian gods are neighbors, not family. Worth preserving archaeologists have found small altars in private houses that mix symbols of Mesopotamian deities with foreign ones, as though people believed that gathering more divine signatures provided better spiritual insurance coverage. Children from the neighborhood gather in the courtyard, wide-eyed with curiosity. They giggle at her accent, then mimic it playfully, then transform it into a game. She laughs along, correcting them with patient humor. Soon they are shouting words in her language while she learns their Akkadian equivalents. This is how languages travel, not in temples or schools, but in courtyards where children prove quicker than scribes at absorbing new sounds. The matron watches approvingly. Historians continue debating how quickly migrant women assimilated into Babylonian society, or whether they lived in separate enclaves. But tonight the evidence produces noisy children shouting trilingual jokes so rapidly you can barely follow the wordplay. The economy of difference. The brewer arrives carrying a ceramic jar. She sets it down and proposes a trade, a bracelet of shells for a pouch of spice. The foreign woman agrees eagerly. Spices prove rare and valuable, but shells carry their own worth. Value here shifts like river currents, determined not by fixed law codes but by immediate need and desire. The matron observes this exchange silently, eyes gleaming with interest. Tomorrow those spices will appear in neighborhood stew, and everyone will talk about the improvement. The first joke of the night tumbles from a boy who bites into the foreigner's flatbread while it is still too hot, and yelps, declaring that the bread speaks another language. Laughter erupts around the courtyard. The matron pats his head and observes bread is always multilingual if you eat it fast enough. Later, a sailor enters the lane, his eyes lighting when he hears the foreign tongue. He responds in broken phrases of his own. He has visited her homeland, or at least its port. They converse haltingly, with laughter bridging what words cannot reach. The matron leans toward you and murmurs that language itself can function as rope, binding strangers together in minutes. Sometimes that rope pulls you to safety. Sometimes it tangles you in knots. The trick lies in knowing which outcome awaits before you are tied too tightly. The weight of memory. Inside the room, you notice a bundle of tablets tucked in a corner. Unlike the neat Akkadian signs you have grown familiar with, these are scratched in different script, curved, flowing, almost dancing across the clay surface. The matron asks to examine one, and the woman hesitates briefly before handing it over. The matron cannot read these marks, but she rolls the tablet in her hands respectfully. Historians continue debating whether such tablets were treasured heirlooms or practical working texts, but here you feel their emotional weight, relics of another homeland, proof that memory can be pressed into clay and carried across deserts. The second joke emerges when the brewer squints at the foreign signs and declares they look like a chicken ran across wet clay. The woman bursts into delighted laughter, and to prove the point, draws similar shapes with her finger in spilled beer, mimicking chicken movements. Everyone laughs until their sides ache, the matron wiping tears from her eyes. Humor, like hunger, ignores all borders. The night deepens gradually. Children drift away to their own homes. The sailor departs. The brewer carries her acquired spice home for experimentation. The matron remains, sipping beer and asking questions slowly, carefully. She learns words here, gestures there, repeating them until her tongue adjusts to unfamiliar sounds. The foreign woman smiles, correcting gently when needed. Language becomes its own form of intimacy, not romantic but sisterly, a bridge built plank by plank across the gap between different worlds. The universal language. The foreign woman shows her amulet, a small stone carved with an image of a goddess riding a bird. She presses it into the matron's hand, allowing her to feel the carved grooves. It represents divine power entirely different from Ishtar, but the message feels familiar, female power riding the wind. The matron nods, understandingly, and places her lion and flower seal beside the foreign amulet. The two objects sit together, silent witnesses that gods travel as much as mortals do. The third joke sneaks in when the matron sighs and says, "One day the gods will need translators as much as we do." The foreign woman bursts out laughing, nodding fiercely in agreement. You picture divine interpreters at work, translating prayers from every accent represented in the city. By the time you leave, the lane feels wider, the air richer with possibility. Foreign voices no longer sound strange. They sound like additional notes in an expanding song. Babylon, you realize, functions less as a city of one tongue than as a chorus of many. And in courtyards like this, women keep that chorus alive, teaching children, trading spices, pressing amulets into each other's palms as gifts of mutual recognition. The matron wakes before dawn, rummaging through her cedar box with purposeful movements. She pulls out not silver or barley, but smaller objects, tokens, trinkets, scraps of memory that carry weight beyond their physical size. She spreads them on a reed mat, each one an anchor to a story that matters more than official records. You sit cross-legged as lamplight wavers over clay, shell, and string. This is not her ledger of debts and payments. This represents her secret accounting of people and promises, relationships that cannot be tallied in silver. The archive of the heart. First comes a clay disc, cracked along one edge, stamped with her lion and flower seal. She explains softly that it once served as an envelope around a tablet, broken open when the debt inside was finally satisfied. She kept the shell not because it held monetary value, but because the day it cracked was the day her freedom expanded measurably. Here is mainstream historical fact. Mesopotamians regularly sealed contracts inside clay shells, breaking them when obligations were met. The fragments should have been discarded as useless, but some women kept them like trophies, the way others might preserve love letters. She shows you a knotted cord, faded red, looped twice as always. This came not from any business agreement, but from friendship. A woman down the lane tied it around her wrist one night before leaving with a caravan guard. She promised to return. She did not. The matron kept the cord anyway, a reminder that promises sometimes vanish into dust and distance. Historians rarely record such absences, because tablets preserve contracts, not disappointments. The matron mutters that absences carve deeper marks than clay ever could. Next comes a bead, green as river water. She rolls it between her fingers, eyes softening with memory. It was payment from a scribe who had no silver, but wanted to leave proof he had been here, had mattered to someone. He never returned. Perhaps he found employment in another city. Perhaps the gods claimed him first. She does not know, but the bead remains, a tiny planet in her cedar box. Worth tucking away. Beads traveled widely in the ancient world, traded from as far as Afghanistan, proof that even the smallest objects could carry continents on a string. The fragments of joy. She produces a small scrap of tablet, edges jagged, words incomplete. You squint at the surface, catching only cuneiform wedges for joy and house. She laughs, explaining the scribe who wrote this made me laugh so hard I kept the broken piece when it fell. It serves no legal purpose, just a shard of laughter turned solid. The first joke surfaces when the brewer, entering at that moment, squints at the tablet fragment and observes, "If joy breaks this easily, no wonder we drink so much." Everyone chuckles, and the clay shard seems to glow warmer than its material should allow. From another pouch, she takes tokens carved in shell, one scratched with a fish, another with a star. She explains they are mementos from sailors who promised to return. She does not keep them because she believed those promises. She keeps them because the weight of a promise, even a broken one, deserves remembrance. She arranges them carefully on the mat, creating a small constellation of absent men. A girl enters, curious, touching the tokens with appropriate reverence. The matron allows this examination, then adds a new piece to her collection, a reed twist tied in a loop. She says this came from a child, given as payment for a story she told. She keeps it not because it has commercial worth, but because it proves stories can serve as currency. The second joke rises when the brewer teases that the child probably still thinks the matron owes him change. The room softens with the accumulated weight of these small objects, each one representing a conversation made solid. The testimony of small things. You realize that for women here, memory gets written not only on official clay but stored in tokens, chords, fragments, a ledger of the heart that balances what the city does not value. Historians continue debating whether unidentified tokens found by archaeologists were economic tallies or personal keepsakes, but looking at the matron's cedar box, you suspect the answer is both, depending entirely on whose hands held them. She pulls out one final item. A scrap of cloth embroidered with a star. She presses it to her cheek briefly before setting it down. This one, she says simply, is for herself. A reminder that she is not just a collector of other people's promises, but someone whose own story deserves a symbol. She does not elaborate, and you do not ask. Some memories require protective silence. The brewer breaks the hush with a philosophical sigh. We keep more junk than kings do. The matron replies, kings keep walls, we keep cords. Ours are lighter to carry. The third joke slides in there, but it carries truth as well. You picture royal monuments crumbling in floods, while these tokens slip easily into cedar boxes, outlasting empires through their own quiet persistence. As dawn brightens outside, the matron packs everything back carefully, tying the box shut with 2 knots, never one. She tucks it beneath her sleeping mat, creating a treasury of memory that no thief would think to steal. Outside, the watchman yawns, tapping his staff with diminishing energy. The city stretches and prepares for another day. Silver and barley will soon jingle and flow again. But for now, what matters are tokens, chords, beads, and scraps. Memory made solid, a life written in keepsakes rather than lore. The charms of fortune. You leave the room with the sense that every woman here carries her own cedar box, visible or not, filled with fragments the world never considered important enough to record. Yet, in the hush before morning, those fragments feel like the truest archive Babylon ever built. The matron's cedar box is tucked away again, but memory clings to her fingers as she ties her sash. Tonight she shows you something different. Not tokens of the past, but charms for the uncertain future. She opens a pouch of soft leather, shaking its contents onto the reed mat. Tiny knots of colored thread, clay beads carved with stars and powders folded in leaves. These are tools of love, magic, and luck, items traded in whispers rather than markets. She picks up a thread, red and tightly knotted. 2 knots, of course, never one. She explains softly that a woman might tie such thread around her wrist or tuck it under bedding to draw affection toward her. Here is mainstream historical fact flickering in the lamplight. Cuneiform tablets do preserve spells of attraction, incantations to bind lovers' hearts, recipes for charms made of herbs and knots. even instructions for whispering divine names in darkness. They sit alongside medical texts, proving the line between love potion and medicine was never clearly drawn. The brewer enters, smirking, holding a little clay amulet shaped like a heart. She claims a scribe carved it for her, after consuming too much beer. It bears a tiny wedge inscription that simply reads, "May she smile." She hangs it on the wall as decoration, but admits she sometimes touches it before sleep. Worth noting, archaeologists have found such playful inscriptions too, not all solemn or priestly, but cheeky little notes scratched into clay like ancient graffiti. Some were probably made with as much laughter as devotion. The rituals of desire. A younger woman demonstrates another technique. She has drawn a figure in ash on the floor, a rough outline of a man, and sprinkles salt on its chest. She mutters the name of someone she fancies, then stamps her foot to seal the charm. The matron raises an unimpressed eyebrow, observing half the men whose names get stamped into dust are not worth sweeping up afterward. The first joke lands there, and the brewer adds that gods must be tired of hearing the same names repeated endlessly, like scribes forced to copy monotonous homework tablets. The girl blushes but insists the method works. Her grandmother swore by it, claiming that stamping a name keeps him from wandering elsewhere. The matron mutters that barley rations do a better job of keeping men in place than salt ever could, but she does not dismiss the practice entirely. She understands that confidence itself is a kind of magic. Historians continue debating how much these spells were performed by ordinary women versus temple specialists. Some incantation tablets describe complex rituals requiring figurines, sacrifices, and formal invocations of gods. Others prove beautifully simple: tie a knot, whisper a name, burn an herb. Tonight you observe the everyday version. Small acts folded into routine, no priest required, just pinches of powder, strategic knots, and words spoken into lamp smoke until belief carries them upward. The matron shows you her own charm, a bead threaded on string, worn beneath her clothing. She explains it is not meant to draw anyone closer, but to guard against obsession, her own or others. Balance proves as important as desire. She touches it twice, then releases it. The protection racket. The brewer teases that if charms worked perfectly, Babylon would be a city of nothing but faithful lovers, and instead it remains a city of taverns. The second joke earns its laughter, and the matron chuckles despite herself. On a shelf sits another figurine, this one winged with bulging eyes and prominent talons. The matron lifts it carefully. "Pazuzu," she says, "a demon not feared here but courted for protection. He drives away worse spirits, especially those who threaten mothers and children." She strokes its surface like greeting an old friend. "Love magic is not just about gaining affection," she explains. "Sometimes it concerns keeping away harm disguised as affection." You notice powder folded in a palm leaf. The matron sprinkles a bit into water and lets you smell the result. Bitter, sharp, almost metallic. She explains, it is mixed for luck in business to make clients generous. She winks, adding too much makes the drinker generous only in insults. The third joke drops in naturally when she recalls a sailor who drank too much of her luck powder and offered to pay her with the moon itself. She told him to fetch it first. As night deepens, the women practice small charms together, half sincere, half mocking. They speak in rhythm while knotting chords, laughter breaking seriousness at precisely the right moments. Outside, the lane hums with ordinary noise, donkeys shifting, children crying, a dog barking at shadows. Inside, the air feels thicker, charged with intent. Whether gods are listening or not, the women are listening to each other, which often proves sufficient. The wisdom of experience. The matron sets everything back into the leather pouch, tying it twice. She tells the younger woman that charms are useful tools, but they are not guarantees. A clever head, a firm voice, and a trustworthy friend prove stronger than any knot. The brewer raises her cup and declares, and a jar of beer outranks all three. Everyone laughs again, but the truth is not lost. Charms help, but survival rests on wit and human bonds. You step outside into cooler air. Stars blink above, some steady, some flickering, like distant conversations. You imagine every knot, bead, and chant drifting upward to join them, threads of hope woven into night itself. Maybe celestial powers listen, maybe they do not. But the city feels softer and safer, as though laughter itself has cast stronger spells than any powder could manage. The night cool lingers, but the matron sighs as she eases onto a reed mat, stretching joints that complain more loudly each season. You realize that time presses differently in this place. Younger women move with quickness, ready to dart or charm, but older ones measure each gesture carefully, as though every choice must justify the effort it costs. The matron pours herself a cup of beer, cloudy and sour, and takes a slow, contemplative sip. Tonight she speaks of growing older in this trade, a truth few bother recording on tablets, but all women in the lane know by heart. The accumulation of years. She remembers her first years standing nervously at doorways, practicing smiles in polished bronze mirrors, trying to distinguish boldness from recklessness. Now her voice can quiet a soldier without rising in volume. Her glance can weigh silver more accurately than scales, and her humor can disarm even the sharpest tongue. Here is mainstream historical fact strolling in. Mesopotamian records sometimes list women in the trade for decades, suggesting that age did not automatically erase their social place. Some transitioned into tavern keeping, others became mediators or managers of houses, respected for experience if not for conventional beauty. The matron herself carries that authority now, a combination of dignity and sharp wit that commands attention. The brewer sits beside her, teasing, "You are more frightening now than you ever were young." The matron chuckles, agreeing readily. "Youth may attract attention," she says, "but age negotiates better terms." Worth-preserving texts from Babylon include insults hurled at older women, mocking their wrinkles or calling them witches, but just as often those same women appear as owners of houses, keepers of debts, and guardians of neighborhood rituals. The contradiction proves as human as it is ancient. The younger women gather nearby, half respectful, half curious. They ask how she keeps clients loyal despite changing appearances. She answers thoughtfully, kindness in proper measure, laughter in surplus, memory sharp as a reed knife. Remember a man's favorite song, his fear of dogs, or the story of his sister's marriage, and he will return. Forget these details, and he will feel erased. She adds, however, that kindness must maintain clear boundaries. She once offered too much patience to a drunk soldier, and nearly paid dearly for the miscalculation. Age taught her to say no faster than a whip cracks. The lessons of time. The first joke slips in when the brewer quips that saying no becomes easier when your knees do not let you chase anyone anymore. The matron swats her with a reed and laughs. Humor keeps pride from turning brittle. They discuss how older women reinvent themselves when necessary. Some become brokers, arranging introductions for fees. Others brew beer like the brewer herself, or keep accounts for entire houses. A few marry late, finding steady companions who value wisdom over youth. The matron mentions that one of her friends married a potter, and now runs his kiln with more authority than he ever possessed. She fires the pots and the man both, earning the second joke through fondness rather than malice. Historians continue debating whether older women in the trade were marginalized outcasts or wielded quiet power as community anchors. You sense the answer lies somewhere between extremes. The matron admits nights are lonelier now, that she occasionally misses the thrill of being courted, but she also delights in watching younger women lean on her advice. Wrinkles are maps, she says, touching her face, each one carved by a choice survived. The younger bead counter asks shyly if she fears the future. The matron stares into her cup, then answers with complete honesty. Yes, age brings fewer clients, and the city does not always reward wisdom with bread, but she points to her cedar box of tokens, her pouch of silver, her friendships with brewer and midwife. I am not rich, but I am not forgotten. That is enough. She presses the girl's hand, teaching her that enough is its own form of wealth. The goddess of experience. The third joke arrives when the brewer sighs and says she hopes to grow old enough that people mistake her for a goddess statue, fed offerings and left in peace. The matron howls with laughter, declaring the brewer already has the appetite of one. The lane echoes with mirth as youth and age laugh together. Here is mainstream historical fact, returning softly. Babylonian texts do record pensions or rations given to women attached to temples, suggesting some lived securely into later years. For others, survival depended on networks, friends, apprentices, chosen family. The matron's lane proves the same principle. It is not just silver but solidarity that sees a woman through all seasons. As night wanes, she leans back, gazing at stars that blink like tired eyes. She murmurs that gods age too, that even Ishtar must sometimes stretch her knees after long nights. The women chuckle, but the thought lingers meaningfully. Age does not erase, it transforms. Where youth charmed, age steadies. Where beauty dazzled, wisdom disarms. You leave the matron on her reed mat, humming a tune from her girlhood. Her voice cracks but remains steady. Younger women curl nearby, listening and learning. In a city that counts barley and silver with obsessive precision, her worth cannot be tallied so simply. She is not a ledger to balance but a lantern, its clay surface chipped, its flame steady, guiding others through nights that will come for them too. The possibility of departure. The matron wakes with a start at dawn, joints aching but eyes sharp. Today she speaks not of staying, but of leaving, the question every woman here wrestles with. Eventually, how do you step out of a life that has wrapped itself around you, like a red mat woven tight? She stirs the ashes of the lamp and sighs. Some leave through marriage, some through craft, a few through inheritance or luck, many do not leave at all. Yet each night the possibility hovers like a door that may open if you dare approach it. You follow her through the lane, as she points out examples of transformation. A neighbor's daughter once apprenticed to a weaver, spending evenings learning to warp a loom instead of waiting by doorways. Now her hands spin cloth finer than her mother ever imagined. Here is mainstream historical fact. Settling in comfortably, weaving ranked among the most common paths for women toward independence in Mesopotamia. Weavers' products appear recorded in temple accounts and traded across cities. A weaver's seal could carry her name proudly without apology or explanation. The matron watches the girl at her loom and smiles softly, observing weaving trades one kind of rhythm for another, the beat of feet on a threshold for the beat of shuttle through warp threads. Another path leads through marriage. A friend of the brewer left years ago to wed a potter. She still visits sometimes, her fingers white with clay, her laugh as quick as ever. She confides that the trade never fully leaves you. It lingers in how you read people, measure trust, count silver by instinct. The marks that remain. Worth noting, some Babylonian marriage contracts actually include clauses about debts or obligations carried over from a woman's earlier life, proving that history did not vanish when vows were spoken. It traveled with her, written on clay tablets that followed her into new households. The matron herself once received an offer from a caravan guard, older, steady, who wanted her to join him upriver. She declined, not from lack of affection, but because she knew rivers consume guards as easily as they carry goods. Better to anchor here than drift and drown. Still, she keeps a token from him in her cedar box, a memory made solid. Historians continue debating how often women truly chose their paths versus being carried by circumstance or men's decisions, but watching the matron, you sense choice always exists, even when narrow choice to refuse, to wait, to carve smaller freedoms into daily life. In the tavern, you overhear discussion of another exit strategy: partnerships. Two women pooling silver to run a beer house, sharing both risk and profit. This is not freedom in the sense of escaping the city's gaze, but it represents a shift from being read as entertainment to being read as authority. The brewer nods approvingly. She herself walked that path, transforming from server to manager. She jokes that beer is a husband who always pays if you know how to tap him right. The first joke earns roars of laughter, truth disguised as jest. The rare chances. You also hear whispers of inheritances, rare but not impossible. A woman whose brother dies without sons may receive property. A widow may control her husband's workshop. These opportunities prove fragile, easily challenged by relatives or magistrates, but they exist. The second joke surfaces when the brewer mutters that relatives appear faster than flies, the moment inheritance gets mentioned. The matron adds that at least flies do not demand scribe fees. The bead counter girl, listening with wide eyes, asks what path she should hope for. The matron touches her hair gently and says, "Hope for survival first, then shape survival into something larger." She explains that leaving the trade is not always a dramatic slamming of doors. Sometimes it is a slow drift. Fewer clients, more brewing, more mediating disputes, more caring for others, until one day you realize you have stepped out without noticing the exact moment of transition. Historians continue debating whether most women ever truly exited, or simply aged into new roles within the same system. The matron insists both are true, depending on the woman and the city's mood. The third joke slips in when the brewer sighs that her own exit plan is simply to brew beer so strong, the magistrate forgets to tax her. The matron chuckles and promises that if that works, she will sell tickets to watch. Even the bead counter girl laughs, her fear softened by humor. The marks we leave. As dusk falls, you walk the lane with the matron. She points to doors that once belonged to women who left, now occupied by others. Some absences ache, some inspire, some are simply forgotten. She shrugs philosophically. Babylon keeps moving whether you stay or go. But she whispers that the trick is to leave a mark, even small, so your name does not vanish when your door does. A seal impression on a tablet, a cord tied twice, a bead in someone's cedar box, memory as exit, as survival beyond survival. Back in her room, she pours a final cup of beer. She admits she does not know her own exit yet. Maybe she will keep tallying debts until her eyes fail. Maybe she will run a tavern. Maybe she will leave with a caravan after all. But tonight she is content with silver in her pouch, laughter in the lane, and friends at her side. The future may not be certain, but the present belongs to her. You watch her lamp flicker, casting doorway-shaped light on the wall. Perhaps that is what leaving looks like here. Not always a leap into the unknown, but a slow widening of light, until you find yourself outside, without realizing when you stepped through the threshold. The matron's laugh fades as a shout cracks through the lane like lightning splitting summer sky. Torches flare where they should not, and boots hammer the ground like drums played without rhythm or mercy. The watchman is not singing this time. He is shouting orders, his voice tight with authority and fear. You duck into the doorway as a band of city officers storms past. Eyes sharp, staves raised like weapons, inspections, raids, punishments. The city's sudden teeth bared when least expected. The teeth of authority. The matron's face hardens into a mask you have not seen before. She has witnessed this dance previously, and knows its steps by heart. The officers shove into a nearby tavern, knocking jars aside carelessly. A brewer cries out as beer spills into dust, dark foam bubbling like wasted wages transformed into mud. They demand to see weights, seals, tablets, proof of honesty in a world where honesty gets defined